I shouldn't have taken that turn. Not the first wrong turn. I'd made plenty of those before. But this one felt different, like the forest itself was watching, nudging me deeper. The trail markers had thinned to almost nothing, just jagged remnants of red paint on bark, worn by wind and rain. I remember looking back, expecting to see the path I had followed. But there was nothing, only trunks rising straight and unyielding, branches clawing at the dim sky. The sun had slipped away hours ago, and now the shadows were thick, pooling between the trees. My flashlight barely cut through the gloom, flickering with the hum of its old batteries. I tried to convince myself it was just low light. That forest looked different at night, but the sounds, they were wrong. Not the usual creaks or groans of trees settling. Something else. Something hesitant, deliberate. A step here, a rustle there, always just beyond the reach of my beam. I called out once, my voice swallowed instantly. Hello? No echo, no response. Just a distant sound of leaves brushing against each other. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing chest, and forced myself to keep moving. The trail, such as it was, twisted unpredictably. My boots crunched over dry pine needles and broken branches. Every so often, I'd catch a glimpse of shadow that looked like it shouldn't be there. Long, thin, moving sideways. I told myself it was a deer. I told myself it was a trick of the light. I wanted to believe that. By the time I realized how late it had gotten, panic was threading through me. The forest felt alive. I could feel the weight of it pressing down, the silence between sounds almost louder than the sounds themselves. My flashlight flickered again. I tapped it, heart hammering. I couldn't remember where the last marker had been. I couldn't even remember if I'd passed one recently. Each tree looked the same as the next. They were enormous, dark, and unyielding. I tried to retrace my steps, but the forest seemed to have shifted. I could have sworn I had come from one direction, but now every path looked unfamiliar. I stopped to catch my breath and leaned against a pine. That's when I noticed it. A faint sound, low and almost rhythmic, like something moving through underbrush, but heavier than a deer, slower. Closer. I froze. My flashlight trembled in my hands, making the shadows flicker across the rough bark around me. My pulse echoed in my ears. I whispered, "Who's there?" My voice sounded pathetic, swallowed immediately by the dense night. No response, only the breathing sound now. Steady, measured, but not mine. I tried to rationalize. It must be a hiker. Someone else lost, like me. Maybe they were scared. Two, maybe we'd meet, find our way back together. That thought gave me a sliver of comfort, though it quickly crumbled when the sound stopped as abruptly as they'd started. And then, I swear I felt eyes on me. Someone staring. I spun, sweeping my flashlight in wide arcs, but there was nothing. Nothing but the trees and the black between them. I started moving again, faster this time, my boots digging into loose dirt and pine needles. My mind was scrambling for landmarks, any sign of the trail, but the forest didn't cooperate. The trees seemed to close in, pressing me from all sides, a living maze with no exits. Every direction I looked was identical. Tall, unbroken trunks, faint red marks fading into shadow. I felt like a mouse in a cage, and the weight of that realization hit me harder than the fear of what might be following me. I thought I heard a voice then, a whisper, soft, almost apologetic. My name? No, it couldn't have been. I don't even know who would be out here. The sound rose and fell, like a person taking steps in rhythm with the forest itself. I stumbled over a root and cursed under my breath. My flashlight swung wildly, catching movement. A shadow passed behind a tree. Not fast, not like a deer. It lingered, watched. I stopped dead, breathing shallow, every nerve screaming. I wanted to run, but my legs felt frozen. I fumbled for my phone, hoping for a signal. Nothing, just that cold black screen, reflecting the night. I pressed the buttons frantically. 911, maybe I could get help. Maybe someone could trace me. My thumb hovered over the call button, but doubt gnawed at me. What would I say? I'm being followed by something? I swallowed the lump of panic. I pressed dial anyway, the ringing inside the forest feeling unreal. The line clicked, static first, then a voice. Professional, calm. I swallowed again, trying to steady my words. I'm lost, I said. I don't know where I am. I'm on the trail near. I paused, realizing I didn't know anything anymore. No markers. No GPS. Just trees. I don't know. Please. There's someone out here. The operator's voice was steady. Stay calm. Can you describe what you see around you? I tried. I said the words. Trees. Shadows. Something moving. A sound that wasn't natural. I felt the weight of my own fear, making my sentences jumpy, incoherent. The operator repeated questions. I tried to answer, but while I talked, I could hear it, or them moving again, slow, careful. I couldn't tell the distance, couldn't tell the direction. Every crack of a branch sent my chest into my throat. My flashlight slipped from my hands, spinning, catching brief glimpses of the forest floor and those shifting shadows. Then silence, a pause long enough to feel wrong. My voice cracked. Hello. I whispered. Tried to keep the line open, hoping someone was still listening. And that's when I realized the shadows were closer now. Too close. I could hear a faint rustling, a shifting of leaves at ground level, circling. My stomach twisted. I had the irrational thought that if I moved, they'd vanish. But I couldn't move. I was frozen. I was staring at nothing. And still, I felt watched. Always watched. I tried to move backwards slowly, trying not to make a sound. Every branch snapped underfoot. Every leaf under my fingers seemed to shout in the night. I thought I saw a figure, taller than a man, impossibly thin, moving in the periphery of my vision. Each time I looked directly, it wasn't there, and yet the feeling never left. Eyes, watching, waiting. I started to stumble, try to retreat toward what I hoped was a trail, but the forest seemed endless. I was trapped in a green-black, suffocating maze. My voice came out as a whisper then, almost pleading. Please, anyone. Static crackled over the line. The operator's voice returned, distant now, comforting yet unattainable. Stay calm. We're tracing your signal. Keep talking to me. I nodded, even though they couldn't see me. I tried to describe what I could see, what I felt, the cold, the darkness, the way the trees leaned toward me like they were breathing. But my words felt useless. The sound, the movement was closer, circling, deliberate, almost playful, or patient, waiting. I stumbled again and fell, scraping my knees on loose roots. My flashlight skidded away, spinning erratically. I could barely see the forest floor, let alone the trail. Panic clawed at my throat. I tried to get up, but my legs wobbled. And then I noticed the footprints. Small, oddly shaped, not human, moving toward me, stopping just short. I froze. My mind screamed to run. My body refused. I watched them, barely breathing. My heart thundered in my chest like a drum, echoing through the trees. The operator asked something I couldn't answer. I felt tears streak my face. The forest pressing closer, heavier, colder. And then a sound. Behind me, not footsteps. Breathing. Slow. Calm. Watching. The kind that knows you're already trapped. My knees buckled. I whispered, please. The line went silent for a moment, the static stretching endlessly. I thought it was gone. But then, just behind me, I heard it again. And I knew, whatever this was, whatever had been circling me, it wasn't going to leave. I wasn't going to find the trail. The forest had me now, and it wasn't letting go. I don't know how long I stayed there, crouched in the black under the trees. Time had no meaning. Every sound, every shadow seemed alive, patient, almost intelligent. The forest wasn't just a place. It was watching. It was waiting. And I, somehow, had wandered into its center. I don't know if anyone ever came. The call ended abruptly, my words swallowed by static and cold. And when the first light of dawn hit the pines, I realized I had no idea which way to go. Every tree looked the same. Every path vanished. I was alone, and I was lost. I thought I had shaken it, the feeling of being watched. But as I moved deeper into forest, I realized the truth. I was wrong. The forest wasn't just around me. It was alive in a way I hadn't noticed before. Every snap of a twig under my boot echoed like a gunshot, and every rustle from above made my heart hitch. I told myself it was just animals, nocturnal creatures startled by my presence. But the sounds weren't right. They were deliberate, measured, almost mocking. I froze. There was again a rustle, a soft shifting of leaves, just beyond the reach of my flashlight. My breath caught. I spun slowly, the beam swinging over the trunks and underbrush. Nothing, only shadows stretching unnaturally long across the forest floor. I blinked, and I could have sworn I saw movement in the corner of my eye. A figure, thin, impossibly still, tucked behind a tree. But when I turned fully, nothing remained. I whispered, almost to myself, "It's just nerves. It's just the dark." My voice sounded strange, foreign even, too loud in the quiet. I forced myself to keep moving, shuffling over roots and loose pine needles, heart hammering. But the forest had changed. The path, if I could call it that, narrowed. The air grew heavier, thicker with moisture and something else, something I couldn't name. I tried to swallow, but my throat was dry. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs refused. Then I heard a footstep, not mine, light, careful, deliberate. My pulse leapt into my throat. I stopped, straining to listen. The rhythm didn't match mine. It circled back and forth, staying just out of reach, always behind me or maybe beside me. I couldn't tell. Panic clawed up my spine. I turned slowly, swinging the flashlight. Shadows twisted unnaturally as the beam caught them. My stomach dropped. The figure or figures were moving in ways that shouldn't be possible. I whispered to the phone still clutched in my hand, praying it worked. "Hello? Please, anyone." Static answered me, long drawn-out bursts that made my ears ache. And then a whisper, not from the phone, not from my mind, but from somewhere around me, clear, direct, my name. I jerked my head, swinging the flashlight wildly. "Who's there?" My voice cracked. No reply, only silence, thick and heavy, pressing against me from every side. I swallowed hard and kept walking, telling myself I just needed to reach the ridge, the high ground I remember from the day before. I needed something familiar, but the forest was unfamiliar now, twisted. The trees seemed closer, taller, their branches reaching down like claws. Every step I took, the soft footfalls followed, sometimes pausing, sometimes quickening, keeping time with my own ragged pace. I stumbled over a root and fell, scraping my hands and knees on the rough bark and dirt. My flashlight rolled a few feet away, illuminating a patch of ground. That's when I noticed it. Small prints. Not human. Too long, too thin, like something stretched and narrow. They led in a circle around where I had fallen, stopping just short of me. I held my breath, frozen. The rustling started again. Closer. Behind me. Beside me. I couldn't tell where it was. I tried to run. My legs shook violently as I scrambled to my feet. Every step seemed to echo, each snapping twig announcing my presence. But the forest wasn't letting me go. I could hear breathing now. Slow, deliberate calm. Not mine. Not human. The shadows flickered again, moving just at the edge of the flashlight's reach, vanishing whenever I looked straight at them. I forced myself to whisper, "I'm not here to hurt you," though I had no idea who or what I was talking to. The whispers started then. Multiple voices, low and distant, barely audible, like a conversation just out of reach. I could catch fragments. "Why are you here? You can't see us." "Stay, stay," my stomach nodded. I couldn't tell if they were real or my mind breaking. I tried to tell myself it was my imagination, my fear twisting sounds into voices. But deep down I knew the truth. The forest had presence, awareness, and I was intruding. I stumbled into a small clearing. Moonlight filtered through the branches, pale and thin. Relief surged briefly. Something to orient me, a glimpse of the world beyond the dark trees. But the relief was short-lived. I saw markings on the trees around the clearing. Strange. Carved symbols, not letters, not numbers. Circular, jagged, almost like runes. I didn't remember them from my hike earlier. and they weren't fresh, but they weren't old either, like they had been waiting for me. A movement caught my eye, a flash at the edge of the clearing. I swung my flashlight, and there it was, a figure, standing perfectly still, limbs too long, shadows stretching impossibly across the ground, its head tilted unnaturally, watching. I could feel it studying me, measuring me, and I knew without a doubt that I wasn't meant to be here. I stumbled backward, tripping over roots again, my flashlight spinning. The beam caught more than one shadow now. Others? Or the same one moving impossibly fast? I couldn't tell. My chest burned. My hands trembled so violently that holding the phone was nearly impossible. I tried dialing 911 again, desperate, but there was only static. The whispering voices grew louder, circling me. I ran, not carefully, not thinking, just running through the trees, branches whipping my face, roots snagging my boots, dirt sliding under my feet. The shadows followed, always just beyond the flashlight, disappearing whenever I tried to face them. The whispers didn't stop. They shifted in tone now, angry, almost amused. My lungs burned, and yet I couldn't stop. I didn't know if I was running in circles or deeper into the forest. I didn't care. All I knew was that I couldn't stop. Then the ground opened under my foot, or maybe I stumbled over something unseen, and I fell hard. The flashlight spun, illuminating a figure crouched a few feet away, watching. Its eyes, or the absence of them, stared into me. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The whispers surrounded me now, coming from every direction, overlapping, almost deafening. My phone slipped from my hand. The line went dead. I lay there for a moment, gasping, trying to understand if I was alone or surrounded. My mind raced with fragments, the footprints, the whispers, the carved symbols. Why were they here? What did they want? And the most terrifying thought, were they waiting for me, or had I stumbled into something far bigger than I could comprehend? The forest had changed again. The clearing I had stumbled into seemed smaller, tighter, the trees bending in ways that weren't natural. I could feel it closing in, like the shadows themselves were breathing. I forced myself up, keeping my head down, moving blindly. Every sound seemed to chase me. Twigs snapping, leaves brushing, whispers laughing just beyond comprehension. And then a sudden silence, the kind that presses into your chest, makes your ears ring. The air grew impossibly cold. I stopped. Nothing moved. Nothing whispered. My flashlight's beam caught a single marking on a tree, unlike the others. An eye, carved deep, staring directly at me. I could feel it watching, feeling me. The rational part of my brain screamed to turn and run, but instinct froze me. I whispered my own name, trying to convince myself I was still real. I moved, inch by inch, through the unnatural quiet, and then I heard it, soft, deliberate footsteps behind me. Not running, not chasing, waiting, watching. I didn't dare look back. I didn't dare breathe. I only moved forward, blindly, through the dark, knowing the forest had me, knowing it knew I couldn't escape. By the time the first faint light of dawn began filtering through the canopy, I realized I was not at the ridge. I was deeper, lost, surrounded, and the whispers hadn't stopped. They were still there, lingering in the trees, patient, waiting. I could feel them, always just beyond sight, circling, silent, and knowing. I didn't know how long I had been running, or if I had run at all. The forest had swallowed time along with the path, and I knew one thing with terrifying certainty. Whatever was here, whatever watched in the shadows, it wasn't done with me. I could feel it before I saw it. The weight in the air, the way the shadows stiffened, like the forest itself had paused to watch me. My flashlight shook in my hands, more from fear than fatigue. But every flicker seemed to make the shadows move faster, stretch longer, closer. I froze mid-step, hearing the crunch of leaves behind me, but it didn't match my rhythm. Whoever, or whatever, was out there. It wasn't following the rules of this world. I tried to make sense of it, tried to convince myself it was just a deer or some stray animal. But the shape didn't resemble anything natural. Tall, thin, almost too elongated, like the light was bending around it, obscuring what it really looked like. And it was staring, I could feel it in my chest, a gaze so heavy it pressed the air from my lungs. My hand went to my pocket. My phone. Thank God. I dialed 911 with trembling fingers, praying for a signal, praying for anyone to hear me. The line clicked and rang. Static hissed. I tried to catch my breath, every nerve screaming. Hello? Please, someone help me. I choked out. My voice sounded tiny against the immense darkness, swallowed by the trees. 911, what's your emergency? The operator's voice was calm, but it felt impossibly far away, like I was screaming into a well. I'm lost. I managed. I'm in the forest, somewhere near Pine Ridge Trail. I don't know. I can't find the path. Someone's watching me. My words stumbled over each other. My heart pounded so loud I could hear it through the phone. Stay calm. Can you describe your surroundings? I looked around, flashlight trembling in my grip. Trees everywhere. Shadows. I think I saw a figure. Tall, thin, not human. Maybe, I don't know. It's just standing there watching me. My voice cracked, and I swallowed hard. I wanted to throw up. I wanted to run, but I could feel it. Its presence, just beyond the light, circling, patient. Are you able to stay in one place? The operator asked. Calm, direct, professional. Yes, I guess. I can try, but it's moving. I can hear footsteps, soft, deliberate, following me. I don't know where to go. I swallowed, holding the phone tight against my ear, my knuckles white. Every rustle, every snap of a branch made me flinch. The figure didn't step fully into the light. Didn't need to. Its presence was enough. All right, we're tracing your signal. Stay on the line with me, the operator said. I nodded even though they couldn't see me. I forced myself to speak, describing what I could. The forest, the shadows, the carved symbols I'd seen earlier, barely visible in the dim light. I could feel sweat running down my back, soaking my shirt. My legs shook, ready to give out at any second. I whispered, please don't let it get closer. Then it moved. Not fast, not running. Just stepped forward. I caught a glimpse of a limb, impossibly long, bending at the wrong angle. My stomach lurched. I tripped over a root, the phone almost slipping from my hand. The operator's voice was still calm, still patient. Are you hurt? No, I can't move. It's just there watching. I swallowed, trying not to scream. My flashlight swung erratically, catching fragments, shadows stretching impossibly long, then gone. My breath came in short, sharp bursts. I wanted to turn and run, but my feet felt glued to the ground. The whispering started again. Low, almost indistinguishable. Not words, exactly, but tones, phrases, half-formed syllables that crawled under my skin. I swallowed again, voice barely audible over the static and my own racing heartbeat. Please, it's there. I see it, moving closer. I don't know what it wants. The operator tried to reassure me. Help is on the way. Keep talking to me. Don't hang up. I shook my head, though they couldn't see me. Talking didn't make it stop. Every word I spoke seemed to make it lean in closer. I could hear the air shift, leaves brushing softly, branches snapping under unseen weight. I spun slowly, trying to catch more of it in the flashlight. And then a face, or something like a face. Pale, elongated, features blurred, as if the shadows themselves had taken shape. I gasped and stumbled backward. My breath left me in a choke. Can you see it? The operator asked. Yes, I can. It's wrong. Not human. Watching me. Waiting. Please. It's... My words caught in my throat. My mind scrambled to make sense. How could it be standing there, and yet the air around it not move? How could it be so present and absent all at once? I stumbled backward again, heart pounding, legs trembling. My flashlight caught more movement at the edge of the clearing. Not one figure now, but multiple, shadows stretching impossibly, slipping behind trees, disappearing when I looked directly. The whispers layered, overlapping, a chorus of incomprehensible murmurs. I wanted to scream, but my voice was gone. Keep your flashlight on it. The operator instructed calmly. Stay where you are. I did, trembling, my hand shaking violently. I forced the beam to stay on the closest figure. It didn't flinch, didn't move, just watched. The whispers grew louder. I realized they were forming words. My name, over and over, distorted, slow, deliberate. My stomach turned. I tried to move, but my feet wouldn't respond. The forest had claimed them, claimed my movement. And then one step, just one. The shadow moved a single, deliberate step closer. I gasped, holding the phone against my ear so tight it hurt. The operator's calm voice clashed violently with my racing heartbeat, grounding me just enough to stay conscious. Where are you exactly? They asked. I tried to explain, pointing toward the ridge, toward anything I could recognize. But the forest had shifted. Trees seemed to lean, trunks twisted unnaturally, paths vanished. My voice shook. I don't know. I think I'm in the clearing. Symbols on the trees, it's surrounding me. There's more than one, please. The footsteps didn't stop. Slow, deliberate, circling, waiting. I could feel it now. The attention of the forest itself, every branch, every leaf aware of me. I could feel eyes pressing from every angle. A presence that was patient, intelligent, and ancient. I realized I wasn't being chased. I was being studied. I sank to the ground, clutching the phone, flashlight shaking in my lap. The shadows hovered just out of reach, twisting as if they were tasting the air around me. The whispers became clearer, words that weren't mine, voices that shouldn't exist. I forced myself to speak, hoping the operator could understand my terrified, disjointed ramble. I can see them, watching me, surrounding me, the symbols, the marks. I don't know what they want. I can't move. Please, help. Static crackled. The voice on the other end repeated instructions, calm, grounding. I clung to it, my lifeline. And then, a sudden, unnatural silence. The shadows stopped. The whispers stopped. The forest held its breath with me. I couldn't tell if they had left or were waiting, patient, just beyond the edge of perception. My chest heaved, sweat and cold mingling. I clutched the phone tighter, hearing my own voice echo back to me, distorted by static. Are you still there? The operator asked. Yes, yes, I whispered. My voice shook. They're still watching. The footsteps resumed. 1, 2, 3. Slow and deliberate. Circling again. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my composure. My mind raced with questions I didn't want to answer. How many were there? What did they want? Would help reach me before it was too late? The flashlight flickered violently, illuminating a branch, a trunk, a space that seemed empty, then catching a form crouched, impossibly still, staring directly at me. I froze. My hands shook uncontrollably. The whispers resumed, overlapping, a low chant now, my name woven into it. I couldn't distinguish reality from imagination. And then, finally, a faint voice through the static. Stay with me. Help is coming. I nodded, even though they couldn't see me. Even though the shadows were still circling. Even though the forest was patient, intelligent, and watching. I had no choice but to keep talking, keep breathing, keep holding on to the one connection I had left. And somewhere beyond the darkness, I realized it wasn't going to leave. The forest had marked me. The shadows were patient. They were waiting. And I knew, deep down, that even if someone came, I might not walk out of the woods the same. The forest was quiet. Too quiet. I remember the instant I stepped into that small clearing. The kind of silence that presses against your ears and seeps into your chest. The whispers, the footsteps, the rustling. They were all gone. Even my own breathing sounded alien. It was as if the forest had paused, holding its breath with me, waiting to see what I would do next. I didn't move at first. I just stood, clutching my flashlight and phone, listening to nothing at all. I thought I had survived. Thought the night, with its shadows and whispers, had finally released me. But I was wrong. The feeling of being watched didn't leave. It's simply gone still, like a predator frozen, just out of sight. My hands shook so violently I could barely hold the phone. I tried to call out, my own voice sounding strange in the unnatural hush. Hello? Anyone? Nothing. The words hung in the air, swallowed by the trees. Then, faintly at first, I heard them. Voices, human this time, calm but urgent, moving closer. Rescue. Relief surged in me like warmth after freezing in ice water. I called back, voice hoarse. I'm here. Please. I'm right. No one could see me. Not yet. I waved my flashlight desperately, its beam slicing through the thick trunks. The voices came nearer, accompanied by the crunch of boots over leaves and broken branches. My legs trembled, and I collapsed onto my knees, relief so strong it almost made me laugh. Someone was coming. I was going to be saved. A hand touched my shoulder. I spun, crying, "Thank God!" There was no one there. Only the cold night air and the faint beam of my flashlight, cutting through the underbrush. My heart skipped, a surge of panic replacing relief. My breaths came fast and shallow. I forced myself to look around, scanning every shadow, but the forest was empty. I was utterly alone. I sank back against a tree, trying to rationalize. Maybe I had imagined it, or maybe the others hadn't arrived yet. Maybe. I wiped my sweaty hands across my face, trying to calm down. That's when I noticed the footprints. They weren't mine. Not exactly. They were long, narrow, like they had been made by someone or something unnatural, and they led deeper into the dark, fading with every step, vanishing where my light couldn't reach. I followed them, heart hammering, moving carefully over roots and pine needles, flashlight swinging, trying to catch every detail. The prints were fresh but impossible. There were too many of them, overlapping in strange ways, circling, doubling back. My stomach churned. The forest seemed alive again, tense, watching. The footprints weren't just evidence. They were a message, a warning. Then, off to my left, I heard the faint crackle of radios and voices. "Here!" I shouted, waving the flashlight frantically. "I'm here! Over here!" Relief washed over me again, stronger than before. I forced myself to stand, almost trembling, and stumbled toward the sound. I could make out figures moving between the trees. Human shapes, boots crunching over the forest floor. Finally, someone shouted my name. But the closer I got, the more the shapes blurred. The figures seemed to drift between the trees, sometimes closer, sometimes vanishing entirely, as if the forest itself were shifting them away. My pulse spiked. My breaths came in panic gasps. I tried to reach them, but the ground seemed to pull me back, roots tangling, branches brushing at my shoulders. Every instinct screamed to move faster, to reach them, but the forest resisted. I stumbled into the clearing again. The footprints ended abruptly. Nothing. No figures. No voices. Only silence. My flashlight trembled in my hand. The forest stretched around me, vast and dark. I realized that even if the rescuers were close, they would find nothing, only me, and the fading prints that led nowhere. I called out again, voice hoarse. "Help, please." Static crackled from the phone. Then a familiar voice broke through. "We're close. Stay where you are." I moved toward the sound, stumbling, tripping over roots, calling their names. And then I saw it, or thought I did, a shadow at the edge of clearing. Tall, thin, watching. Still, for a moment, I froze, every muscle locked, heart pounding in my throat. The rescuers must have seen it too, right? But when I blinked, it was gone. Relief and terror collided in my chest. I screamed internally, demanding logic, reasoning. I forced myself to move again toward the voices. My boots sank into the loose forest floor. I caught glimpses of movement between the trunks. Fleeting, impossible. My mind screamed that I was imagining things, yet the chill crawling up my spine told me I wasn't. The forest had shifted again. Time and space felt distorted. I stumbled, calling out again. "I'm here. My voice caught in my throat. The forest went quiet again, the way it had when I first entered the clearing hours ago. Even the birds seemed gone. My flashlight beam caught the footprints one last time, fading into darkness, disappearing completely where the eye couldn't follow. I realized that the forest had swallowed them, erased them, leaving only the memory of their presence. I dropped to my knees, the weight of exhaustion and fear pressing down. My chest heaved. The whispers, the footsteps, the shadows, they had all vanished, leaving only the silence. The forest seemed to breathe around me, patient and eternal. I tried to rationalize again. Perhaps the rescue team would reach me any moment. Perhaps I was hallucinating. Perhaps I had imagined the footprints, the shapes, the figures. But then, through the faint moonlight and thinning trees, I saw it again. A shadow, longer and thinner than any human, just at the edge of my flashlight beam. Not moving, not fleeing, just waiting, watching. I froze, chest tightening. Even as I strained to breathe, I understood something that clawed to my rational mind. The forest hadn't released me. It had only paused, letting me see the world beyond for a moment, before reclaiming its patience. The voices of the rescuers grew louder, closer, boots crunching over the forest floor. Shouts, commands. I waved my flashlight, tears stinging my eyes. Over here, I shouted. Relief coursed through me again, almost unbearable in its intensity. My legs moved, stiff and trembling, toward the sound. But the shadow didn't move. It stayed there, patient, waiting. My flashlight caught again briefly. A figure impossibly still, impossibly silent, staring at me from the darkness. I blinked and it was gone. Only the footprints remained, fading, vanishing into the unseen depths of the forest. When the rescuers finally reached me, I could barely stand. I collapsed into the arms of one, shaking, sobbing. I don't know how I got here. I whispered, voice hoarse. Something was following me, watching me. I don't know what it was. They tried to calm me, telling me I was safe now, that I was going to be okay. And yet, even as I leaned against them, feeling the human presence, the warmth, the voices, I couldn't shake the image of the shadows, the impossible prints, the still figure waiting at the edge of the clearing. The forest behind us seemed to shift in the corner of my vision. I thought I saw movement, just a flicker, nothing concrete. But it was enough. My stomach twisted, my pulse spiked. Even though the rescuers surrounded me, the trees seemed alive again, patient, waiting. I forced myself to look away, toward the path out, toward the lights from the road. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, to never return. And yet, deep in the pit of my stomach, I knew the forest had marked me, had remembered me. As we moved towards safety, I glanced back one last time. Nothing, only the dense, dark forest, only silence. And yet, I knew it wasn't over. I could feel the patience lingering in the shadows, in the gaps between trees, in the earth itself. I would leave the forest, but a part of it would follow me, always waiting, always patient, always watching. We drove past the last gas station, the town shrinking behind us, and the road ahead narrowed, twisting between trees that seemed to close in as we went deeper. I could feel the air change, cooler, heavier, the kind that smells faintly of moss and damp earth. The GPS signal flickered, then died entirely. My partner laughed, tried to make it light, but I could feel the edge in the silence that followed. "You're overthinking," they said. But I wasn't. There was something different here, something that made the normal rules feel suspended. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see headlights that weren't ours. They never appeared. The road curved again, and the car bounced over roots and loose stones. My excitement was a thin veneer over unease, a veil I could barely keep in place. The cabin appeared suddenly, tucked between massive pines, almost hidden, its weatherwood blended into the forest. Shingles darkened with age and moss. A single plume of smoke spiraled from the chimney. Despite the quiet, lifeless air, my partner parked, keys jingling in their hand. "Here it is. Our escape." I nodded, but a chill ran down my spine. Even in daylight, the shadows around the cabin felt thick, too dark for a sunny afternoon. Inside, the air smelled of wood polish and old fire. Dust motes floated lazily in the slanted light through the windows. It was rustic, cozy even, but there was a stillness that felt unnatural, like the house itself was holding its breath. My partner moved around, opening cabinets, laughing at the creak of the floorboards. I tried to match their energy, but every sound seemed amplified. Every shadow shifted when I blinked. I forced a smile. "It's perfect," I said, even as the unease lingered. We unpacked our bags, the normal routine of weekend escape. But as I stacked plates in the small kitchen, I noticed them. Carvings in the wood, subtle, almost decorative, but not quite. Twisting shapes, like letters that made no sense. Symbols I couldn't read. I ran a finger over one, tracing the deep groove, and felt a chill. My partner called me from the living room, laughter echoing, pulling me back into the mundane. I left the mark behind, but the feeling stayed, crawling along my skin. Outside, the forest pressed close to the cabin. The air was so still that when a bird finally took flight, the sound of its wings startled me. I walked along the small path behind the cabin, crunching over pine needles. The sun dipped lower, shadows stretching into long fingers that seemed to reach for me. My partner called from the porch, waving me back. "Come see the view." I nodded, forcing calm into my movements. But the deeper I walked, the more the forest felt alive, aware. That night, we lit a fire in the fireplace. The glow warmed the room, and I told myself it was enough to make the unease fade. But as the flames danced, I noticed movement in the corners of my vision, shadows that didn't match the logs, shifting shapes in the darkness outside the window. I told myself it was imagination, that the forest was just playing tricks with the light. My partner leaned back, smiling, unaware of the tension tightening my chest. Later, we opened a bottle of wine, trying to shake off the creeping feeling, but as the fire crackled, I could hear something outside, a soft rustle, barely audible, like the brushing of branches against something larger. I froze, holding my breath. My partner asked what was wrong, and I laughed nervously. "Probably just an animal," I said, though I didn't believe it. I kept my eyes on the window, the forest beyond darkening, seeming to shift closer with each passing second. The night deepened, and the sounds outside grew stranger. Not wind, not animal. Something deliberate, moving in ways that shouldn't be possible. A snap of a branch too precise, a whisper of air that felt like it was being pushed by weight, not breeze. I could feel it watching, circling, patient. My partner slept soundly, unaware, and I envied them. Envy and terror twisted together, making my stomach knot. I tried to sleep, pulling the blankets close, but every creak of the cabin, every whisper of the forest made me flinch. I thought I heard voices, soft, indistinct, just at the edge of comprehension. Whispers that weren't quite words, but syllables shaped like warning, like memory, like hunger. I forced myself to close my eyes, to tell myself it was a dream. But dreams didn't leave the cold weight of observation on your chest, pressing down until you could barely breathe. I got up, needing to move, needing to check the windows, the doors. The flashlight in my hand trembled, the beam cutting through darkness, illuminating the forest, the trees, the stillness. Every tree seemed to lean, every shadow stretched toward me. I shivered and turned back toward the cabin, but the interior felt different, larger. Deeper shadows pooled in corners that hadn't been there before. I swallowed, forcing my heart to slow. The wind picked up a low sigh that rattled windows. I held my breath, listening. Something shifted outside, a figure, or just my imagination. I couldn't tell. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, to run back into the car and escape. But the curiosity, the pull of this place, kept me rooted. I moved toward the bedroom, my footsteps loud in the empty cabin, heart hammering. I thought I saw it again, a shadow at the edge of my vision. Too tall, too still, watching. I spun, but nothing remained, only the forest, deep and silent, pressing against the thin walls. I forced a laugh, telling myself I was imagining it, that the cabin, remote and empty, just made every small sound and shadow seem alive. My partner stirred in sleep, murmuring softly. I envied their oblivion again. I returned to bed, trying to convince myself of the normal. But the carvings on the wall, the subtle shapes in the wood, the impossibly patient shadows outside, they didn't leave. I could feel them pressing just beyond awareness, waiting, watching. I told myself it was just a forest, just isolation, just a mind's trick in the dark. But the truth lingered, crawling along my skin, whispering from the corners. Morning came, pale and thin, sunlight filtering weakly through the thick canopy. I felt a brief relief, the tension easing slightly with the light. But even in the day, the forest seemed different, alive in a way it hadn't been before. Watching, waiting, and I knew, even as I tried to laugh with my partner over coffee, that something had taken notice, something patient, something that didn't forgive visitors who ignored the warnings. I pushed the thought away, forcing normalcy. "We're safe," I said, half believing it. My partner smiled, unaware, and I wanted to join in that happiness. Wanted to let the weekend escape be just that. Simple, quiet, peaceful. But the weight of the forest, the carvings, the subtle presence lurking the corners of my awareness, refused. It clung to me, a silent warning I couldn't shake. And as we made plans for the day, hiking, exploring, enjoying solitude, I couldn't help but glance toward the tree line, toward the darkness waiting beyond. Something had seen us arrive. Something had already begun marking its awareness. And I knew, deep in my bones, that the forest wasn't going to let us leave unchanged. It started with a single knock, sharp, deliberate, echoing through the cabin like a warning. I froze mid-breath, the wine glass in my hand trembling, almost slipping from my fingers. The fire had burned low, shadows stretching long across the walls, and suddenly every corner felt alive. My partner stirred on the couch, half asleep, unaware. I swallowed, telling myself it was the wind. The old wood of the cabin groaned, and the trees pressed against the windows. But the knock came again, closer, heavier, impossible to ignore. I set the glass down, heart hammering, and moved toward the door. My flashlight caught the handle, cold and metallic, and the thin gap beneath the door seemed darker than the night outside. I pressed an ear to the wood, listening. Silence. No movement. No rustle of footsteps on the porch. Nothing. Just the faint whisper of wind through the pines. I exhaled slowly, trying to convince myself I was imagining it. Maybe a branch, a loose shutter. But the certainty in my chest told me otherwise. Knock. Again. This time, 3 rapid raps, almost mocking. I jumped, my stomach nodding. I shook my head and muttered, "It's nothing. Just the wind. Just something stupid." I reached for the doorknob, hand trembling, and peeked through the small window. Nothing. Only darkness. Only the forest pressing closer, black and patient. The porch light flickered as if in response, throwing the trees' long shadows against the cabin walls. Something moved at the edge of my vision, or maybe it hadn't moved at all. Maybe I had just blinked. I called my partner's name softly, voice trembling. "Hey, wake up." They mumbled something incoherent, rolling over, oblivious. Relief and frustration tangled inside me. I was alone with the sound, alone with the knocks that didn't belong, alone with the sense that the forest outside had grown patient, waiting. I pressed my ear to the door again. Still silence. The knocks had stopped. For a moment, I considered laughing at myself. Maybe I had imagined the whole thing. Then came the whisper. Not outside. Not wind. Inside. A soft, almost imperceptible hiss, like someone breathing just beyond the door. I froze, staring at the dark window again. My flashlight shook in my hand, throwing light over the porch railing, the steps, the surrounding forest. Nothing. The stillness felt deliberate, watching me, weighing me. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my breathing even. Knock. 3 quick raps. And then again. I jumped this time, my chest tight, muscles coiled. Whoever, or whatever, was there knew I was awake, knew I was watching. My fingers pressed to the doorframe as if to anchor myself. The thought of opening, it didn't even occur to me. Something in my gut screamed to run, to flee into the trees behind the cabin, though logic told me the forest was no safer. I whispered to my partner, louder this time. "Get up, there's something at the door." They groaned, half lifting, still too groggy to comprehend. I grabbed a chair and held it between us and the door, shaking. Don't come out." They blinked at me, confusion clouding their eyes, but the fear in my voice seemed to register. Their bodies stiffened, and they sat up, suddenly alert. Another knock. 3 short raps, precise. The chair trembled beneath my hand. My mind scrambled for explanations. Neighbor? Impossible. The cabin was miles from the nearest house, buried in the forest. Animal? Couldn't be. Nothing with paws or claws could hit the door like that. It was deliberate, conscious, watching, waiting, and I realized, with a sick twist in my stomach, that the knocks weren't random. They were counting, signaling, almost mocking. I took a cautious step back, tried to regain control, heart hammering against my ribs. My partner reached for my hand, and I grabbed it reflexively. The warmth grounded me, but only slightly. Outside, silence returned, but the air felt thicker, heavier. The forest seemed to lean closer, waiting for the next move, for the next sign of fear. I swallowed, forcing a rational thought. It's just the isolation, the stress, cabin in the woods, nothing more. But the rational part of me sounded hollow even as I said it. Another rap, this time softer, slower, deliberate. 1, pause. 2, pause. 3, the pattern, precise, deliberate. I could hear it clearly now, echoing the cabin. My stomach twisted. I pressed my hand to my mouth to stifle a gasp. My partner's eyes widened, realizing something was wrong, something they couldn't explain. We both stared at the door, paralyzed. The sound came again, then stopped. I strained my ears, listening. Nothing. Then movement. A shadow crossing the porch, just a flicker at the edge of the window. I blinked, and it was gone. My chest tightened. My pulse spiked. The forest outside pressed, silent, patient. Every instinct screamed that it was watching, learning, waiting for me to react. My hands shook as I gripped the flashlight tighter. The light trembled, casting tall, distorted shadows across the cabin walls. I tried to speak, voice shaking. Who's there? The words sounded thin, weak, swallowed by the silence. No answer, not even wind. Just the oppressive stillness and the memory of the knocks. Precise and deliberate. Then a single tap, soft, almost imperceptible, on the window behind me. My stomach dropped, my heart leapt. I spun. Nothing. Only the pale moonlight casting silver patterns through the trees, long and crooked like fingers reaching for me. My partner gripped my arm. We should leave, they whispered, voice barely audible. Relief mingled with terror. Finally, someone agreed with my instincts. We moved quickly, gathering keys, bags, and phone, though the signal was still gone. The forest seemed to watch our every motion, silent but patient. The knocks never came again. Not that night. Not as we fled. We didn't sleep. Instead, we sat, backs to each other, listening. Every creak of the cabin, every whisper wind to the pines, felt like a threat, a countdown to something we didn't understand. I kept checking the door, expecting, waiting, but nothing appeared. Just a memory of those precise, deliberate knocks. The way they measured us, counted us, marked us. Morning came slowly, weak light filtering through the trees. The forest felt less oppressive in daylight, but the memory of the night remained, a weight pressing on my chest. The cabin, once cozy, now felt alien, every corner hiding shadows that remembered the knocks. We packed quickly, leaving the keys on the counter, avoiding eye contact with the carvings in the walls. Even in daylight, their shapes seemed sharper, darker, more deliberate. Driving away, I glanced back once. The cabin was still there, quiet, unassuming, but I could feel it watching, patient, marking the memory of our fear. The forest swallowed it, but I knew the memory remained, waiting for the next visitor. The knocks hadn't stopped. They were just patient, biding their time, until someone else ignored the warnings, until someone else let the isolation lure them in. Even now, weeks later, I can't hear a knock without flinching. I can't see a shadow at the edge of vision without remembering. Something in that forest learned me, marked me, and I know, deep down, it won't forget. The phone rang once, twice. The signal had been spotty all day, but now it lit up bright in my hand, a lifeline against the dark pressing in. I grabbed it, fumbling with trembling fingers, and held it to my ear. The dial tone was long, thin, a thread pulling me toward hope. My partner leaned close, whispering, eyes wide. The cabin felt smaller somehow, every shadow stretching, reaching. Outside, the wind picked up, whispering through the trees, but inside, something heavier pressed down. I dialed. The buttons felt slippery, my thumb shaking so badly the numbers blurred. 911, I muttered and pressed call. The line connected, static buzzing softly. I swallowed, trying to speak normally. Hello. Yes, this is an emergency. My voice cracked. My partner clutched my arm, fingers digging in, and I felt their fear matching mine. The cabin seemed to shrink further around us, the walls closer, shadows coiling the edges of the firelight. A voice answered. Calm, professional, routine. 911, what's your emergency? I swallowed hard, trying to steady my own racing thoughts. My mouth opened, but no words came at first. Then I stammered. We're at a cabin. Remote. There's someone here. I don't know. Something. It's... My words faltered. The firelight flickered, and I saw movement. Shadows that shouldn't be there, shifting in corners. My partner whispered, "Did you hear that?" And I froze. At first, I thought it was the wind again. But then, clear, distinct, someone called my name. Soft, deliberate, almost gentle. Jason. I stiffened, heartbeat thudding. I wasn't imagining it. The voice came from inside the cabin. Not outside, not the trees. Inside. I hear them. I whispered into the phone, voice tight. Someone or something is inside. The operator asked questions, but their voice faded under the sound that pressed in from the corners of the room. Murmurs, faint calling, insistent. Another name, my partner's. Mara? My stomach twisted. The shadows shifted again, closer now, slithering along the walls, the ceiling. The air was thicker, almost solid, and I could feel it pressing against my chest, making it hard to breathe. I tried to move toward the source, hands outstretched, flashlight trembling in my grip. The shadows recoiled from the beam, but then merged back, forming shapes, almost human, almost familiar. The names whispered again, softer this time, just at the edge of comprehension, teasing, pulling. I stumbled backward, hitting the wall, heart pounding. We need help. I yelled into the phone. Please come, please. My partner grabbed the cord, holding it, panic mirrored in their eyes. Then silence. Thick, sudden. The whispering stopped. The shadows froze, indistinct, just dark shapes and corners. My chest heaved. I tried to speak into the phone, to tell the operator everything, but my throat was dry, words sticking. Then a single soft knock, just behind us. The chair we'd left in the hallway rattled slightly. My partner screamed, grabbing me, and I spun, flashlight cutting through the dark. Nothing, only the memory of the shadows, watching, waiting. The voice came again, louder, now unmistakable. Kissima, I turned in a circle, but the room appeared empty. The cabin's walls, floor, and ceiling seemed ordinary, solid. But the sound, the presence, remained. I whispered into the phone, voice barely above a gasp. It's inside. It's in the cabin. I don't know what it is. Please. The operator's calm voice tried to reassure me, but it was swallowed by the sensation pressing down on every nerve, every muscle. Another name, but distorted, twisted, wrong. My own voice called back at me, echoing, distorted. Jason, come. I stumbled toward the sound, but every step felt heavier, like wading through invisible water. My partner clutched my hand tighter, eyes wide. Don't go, they pleaded. But the urge to find the source, to understand, overrode everything. The shadows moved again, curling and shifting in impossible ways, just beyond the reach of the flashlight. A cold draft swept through the cabin, though all windows were closed. My hair stood on end. The whispering names multiplied, overlapping now, voices merging, coming from every corner, every wall, every shadow. I pressed the phone to my chest, desperate, listening. The operator's voice was calm, asking for a location, but I couldn't answer. I didn't know. Even if I tried, the forest outside seemed to twist and shift, the paths we'd driven disappearing into darkness. Suddenly, a sound unlike anything before, A faint scraping, like nails against wood. Slow, deliberate. My stomach dropped. I froze, trying to pinpoint it. The floorboards outside the bedroom, the walls, impossible. Yet it was close, right behind us, and we both felt it. My partner whispered, voice trembling, "We have to leave, now." I wanted to agree, but something kept my feet rooted, a mixture of fear and morbid curiosity, desperate to see, to know what waited in the shadows. Another soft knock, this time on the wall near the fireplace. I jumped, hard on my throat, dropping the flashlight. The beam skittered across the floor, illuminating nothing but shadows, the room appearing normal, almost calm. I bent down, picking up the flashlight, and when the beam swept past the corner, I froze. A figure, indistinct, blurry, taller than a person should be, dissolved into the shadows as if it had never existed. I screamed into the phone, words spilling uncontrollably. "It's here. It's inside. You have to send help. Please." My partner's hand shook in mine, eyes darting to every corner, every shadow. The cabin felt alive now, the walls breathing, the air pulsing with quiet menace. The operator was asking questions, giving instructions, but I couldn't focus. Every nerve in my body screamed that whatever had our names, whatever was inside, could hear everything we said, and then silence. Total, deafening. The whispering stopped. The figure was gone. The cabin was still, but the air felt thick, as if something unseen had passed, marking, measuring. My chest heaved. My legs trembled. The fire sputtered in the fireplace. Tiny sparks floating. Shadows dancing innocently now, almost mocking in their normalcy. I sank to the floor, phone pressing my chest, shaking. My partner curled against me, whispering, "It's gone, right? It's gone." I didn't answer. I couldn't. The names, the whispers, the presence in the shadows, they hadn't left. They had paused. They were waiting, watching, patient, learning. And I knew, deep in my bones, that the moment we turned our backs, even for a second, they would return. The operator stayed on the line, calm and professional, asking questions, giving instructions. I answered mechanically, voice hollow, directions, addresses, explanations. All of it felt meaningless against the weight of what had occurred. Outside, the forest remained silent, still unyielding. The cabin, once a haven, had become a trap, a vessel for something patient, deliberate, and far older than we could understand. When the emergency crew finally arrived, hours later, the forest was quiet, too quiet. No sign of movement, no shadow to follow. Just a cabin, ordinary in the sunlight, normal as though nothing had ever happened. But I knew what had been inside, and I knew it hadn't left. The whispers would return, the knocks would come again, and the memory of our names, spoken softly, intimately, from the darkness, would haunt me forever. I couldn't tell if my eyes were playing tricks on me, or if the shadows themselves had grown restless. Every corner of the cabin seemed to breathe, the walls subtly curling, stretching, or recoiling in the faint firelight. I'd been sitting on the couch, phone pressed to my ear after the 911 call, feeling some fragile connection to the outside world, but the longer I stared into the corners, the more certain I became that nothing about this room obeyed normal rules anymore. At first, it was small, a flicker across the far wall, something too quick to fully register. I shook my head, telling myself it was a fireplace, the firelight dancing on the old wooden paneling. My partner murmured something behind me, but I couldn't focus on words, only on the dark patches gathering where light should be. They weren't just shadows from the fire, they had edges, subtle curves, as if aware of where I was looking. When I shifted my gaze directly, they seemed to flatten, smear, retreat, but only to return moments later, a fraction closer or from a different angle. I tried to laugh, a nervous chuckle that fell hollow even in my own ears. "It's just the light," I told my partner. "That's all. Shadows move with fire. That's normal." But the words sounded empty. My partner didn't respond, only shivered, pulling the blanket tighter around their shoulders, eyes flicking to every corner, too afraid to speak. I wanted to believe it was normal, scientific, logical. I wanted to believe I wasn't going insane, but the air in the cabin felt heavier, as if something unseen pressed against my chest, waiting, patient. Then one of the shadows moved again, slow, deliberate. It slid along the wall without breaking its own shape. I froze, unable to breathe. I tried to follow it with my eyes, but when I looked directly, nothing was there, just a normal texture of wood. But in the corner of my vision, it persisted, creeping along the floorboards, climbing the walls, darting just out of full view. My stomach churned. I wanted to look away, to pretend, but something primal kept me staring, needing to see. I whispered into the dim room, "Who's there?" My voice shook. Silence. And then soft footsteps. Not my own, not my partner's. Something moving across the cabin floor, light but deliberate. I could hear the faint creak of wood under weight, but the direction kept shifting impossible angles, as if whatever moved wasn't bound by normal rules. My partner gasped behind me. "Did you hear that?" I nodded, unable to respond. My fingers gripped the armrest until they ached. The shadows began to respond to me. Every time I blinked, they changed. Edges had been sharp blurred into liquid black, then pulled into shapes I almost recognized. Tall, thin figures, vaguely humanoid, always vanishing the moment I tried to focus on them. I wanted to scream, to throw the flashlight at them, but my hands refused to obey. It felt like the cabin had rewritten itself around these shapes, bending physics just enough to make them impossible to catch in my vision. I took a step back, my partner pressing close, murmuring reassurances I couldn't hear clearly. The floor beneath us seemed to pulse, a subtle vibration I could feel in my bones. Each time I tried to move toward the door, shadows shifted ahead of me, blocking the path without fully forming. They weren't solid, but they were there, obstructing, teasing. My heart hammered. Panic rose, thick and fast, but somehow I couldn't tear my gaze away. A sudden movement caught me off guard. One shadow, more defined than the rest, coalesced near the fireplace. It looked vaguely human. I could almost make out the curve of shoulders, the angle of a head. I thought I saw eyes reflecting the firelight. I gasped, taking a step forward, and when I blinked, it was gone. Only the blank wall remained, normal and cruel in its calm. I sank to my knees, hands shaking. The room felt enormous and suffocating at the same time. I tried to speak again, voice higher, frantic. "Please, whatever you are, just stop. Leave us alone." The silence answered. The shadows pulled tighter in the corners, slithering like liquid, and I realized with a chill that they weren't obeying the rules of the room. They were alive, aware of us. Every movement we made, every breath, every blink. It mattered. They reacted, changed, adapted. My partner reached her phone, dialing 911 again, desperate. But I knew even before the line connected that it wouldn't help, not fully. The moment we exposed ourselves, the shadows would react, move faster, twist in ways our minds couldn't predict. The walls felt close now, tighter. Every corner seemed to bend, a subtle curvature that made the cabin feel wrong, unfamiliar. I tried to shake my head, tried to convince myself it was exhaustion, imagination, fear overloading my senses. But the shadows disproved that with every flicker, every motion. A strange realization hit me. They moved when I looked away. They vanished when I focused. I realized I was the observer, the one giving them form. They were nothing when watched directly, yet their presence was undeniable, felt in the air, in the tension pressing into our skin, into our chest. They were real, but only just beyond perception, teasing the edges of what I could comprehend. I staggered back, eyes wide, stomach twisting with nausea and terror. The fire sputtered, tiny sparks scattering like glowing insects. One shadow, more daring, extended along the floor, thin and jagged, creeping toward us. My partner screamed softly, grabbing my hand. I pulled them close, backing into the far wall. The shadow halted just short, its shape flaring, dissolving whenever I looked directly at it, only to reappear somewhere else. The room was alive now, a predator made of dark angles and impossibilities, watching us. And then a sudden pause. The shadows froze, almost contemplative. as though waiting for us to make a mistake. I realized our fear fed them, gave them form. Every whisper of panic, every heartbeat, every shaky breath made them sharper, more distinct, more daring. I could feel them pressing closer, not touching, but surrounding, probing. I wanted to run, but my legs refused. Every step I considered seemed preemptively blocked by darkness. Minutes passed like hours. I couldn't track time. The shadows shifted constantly, teasing, moving, vanishing. Then the faintest sound, a soft scraping, almost imperceptible, came from behind the kitchen door. A silhouette slid across the frame when I glanced. Another figure flickered near the ceiling, vanishing as I raised a flashlight. My partner sobbed quietly, shaking. I could feel their terror radiating into me, amplifying mine. I sank against the wall, holding them, pressing the flashlight between us. The shadows remained, not all at once, but everywhere I wasn't looking. A whisper brushed my ear, soft, almost tender. A name. I froze, stomach lurching. Not my partner's. Mine. Something knew me intimately, calling me across the room, teasing me into turning my head. My throat went dry. I couldn't speak, couldn't look, couldn't move. Then, just as suddenly, the shadows recoiled. They retreated, pooling in the corners, flattening into nothingness. The room looked normal again. Normal, except for the palpable silence. The tension still lingering like a thick fog. I sank fully to the floor, trembling. My partner's hand clutched mine, shaking, and we both stared at the walls, trying to convince ourselves it was over. But I knew the moment we blinked or turned our backs, they would return. I realized the truth then. This cabin, the shadows, whatever they were, they weren't just in the room. They were in the space between us, in the pauses, in the moments we didn't watch closely enough. They were everywhere, and they waited for us to falter, to look away. I whispered a vow, almost to myself. I'll never turn my back again. I'll never look away. The shadows remained still for a moment, almost as if considering my words, then settled into the corners, watching, patient, unyielding, immortal in their patience. And I knew that even in the safety of daylight, even in the warmth of other people, the memory of the shifting shadows would haunt me. They would always return, bending perception, twisting reality. Waiting for the next moment, I let my guard down. The sun was barely touching the trees when the authorities arrived. I could see their headlights slicing through the fog, sharp beams cutting across the forest floor, chasing away the night, but leaving everything else in shadow. My stomach turned, a low knot of dread twisting tighter as the realization hit me. I wasn't there. I couldn't be there. And yet, I could feel the cabin, its cold walls, the lingering scent of smoke and old wood, as if my body remembered what my mind refused to accept. They moved slowly through the driveway, boots crunching over gravel. I stayed hidden behind the nearest cluster of pines, watching, listening. My heart thumped hard, a rhythm that matched the distance between them and the cabin. I wanted to call out, to warn them, to scream that something wasn't right, but my voice caught somewhere deep in my chest, strangled by fear. The cabin came into view, small and quiet, eerily intact. Nothing seemed wrong at first glance. No signs of struggle, no footprints leading away except the ones they had followed to get here. The front door was locked, key still dangling in the inside lock. Windows shut, curtains drawn, as if the occupants had never left at all. I pressed myself closer to the trees, frozen, watching, try to reconcile the memory of my frantic calls, my partner's screams, the shadows, the knocking, the voices, and this impossibility. One officer crouched near the door, checking the lock. He rapped lightly on the frame, calling inside. "Anyone here? Come on out." His voice was steady, professional, but I could hear the undertone of disbelief, a faint tremor he tried to hide. Another officer circled the cabin, flashlights sweeping across the exterior. They were methodical, thorough, but nothing they did could explain what I already knew. The cabin should have been empty, but not like this. Not so perfectly, so hauntingly still. A soft breeze rattled the shutters. The officers paused, listening, exchanging glances. Their radios crackled softly, a stream of static and low voices. I wanted to laugh, a nervous, bitter laugh at how normal everything looked to them. They couldn't see what I saw, what I felt. They couldn't sense the air thickening with presence, the lingering echo of shadows, the faint pulse of something unseen just beyond their senses. I shivered, hiding behind the trees, watching them move through the motions of search that couldn't yield the truth. Inside, the cabin smelled faintly of smoke and damp wood, exactly as I remembered it. I wanted to warn them. Don't touch anything. Don't step too far. Don't look too closely. But my body remained behind the trees, as though some invisible tether kept me from intervening. I could see the officer shine his flashlight into corners, then step back, confusion spreading across his face. He muttered something to his partner, words I couldn't hear. The back door, I noticed, was slightly misaligned. A subtle gap at the bottom, just enough for a shadow to slip through, but there was nothing there. No footprints. No sign anyone had passed through. They didn't notice. The officers were thorough, yet oblivious to the irregularity, blind to the trace of presence that lingered in every corner. I remembered the shadows, how they shifted when I looked away. I remembered the voices calling my name, teasing us into looking where we shouldn't. And now, I realized with sinking weight that maybe the shadows didn't need me anymore. Maybe they had waited, patient, for us to leave, for the cabin to be empty in the eyes of the world, ready to erase our existence without a trace. One officer checked the fireplace, crouched down, flashlight cutting through the dim interior. He muttered about soot, about a draft, about nothing at all. Everything was normal. Everything was empty. Everything was wrong. The absence of evidence felt alive, pressing against reality like a hand from another world. I could almost feel the cabin breathing, subtle vibrations beneath the floorboards, the lingering pulse of something watching, waiting, satisfied. The officer stepped outside again, conferring in hushed tones. One leaned against the hood of the cruiser, scratching his head. No one inside. Doors locked. Windows closed. No sign of struggle. Nothing. His partner shook his head, a mixture of irritation and unease. They spoke of paperwork, of miscommunication, of the possibility that the occupants had left early. They didn't know, couldn't know, that leaving was impossible, that the cabin had claimed its silence, swallowed us whole, and left nothing but questions. A crow cawed somewhere in the trees, sharp and piercing. I flinched, heart-hammering. The shadows inside weren't visible to them, but I knew they lingered, pooling in corners, watching, alive in a way that defied reason. The officers packed up, leaving, radioing in their report, their lights retreating down the driveway. Normalcy returned slowly, the world outside resuming its ordinary rhythm, unaware of the cabin's secret. I stayed hidden long after the vehicles disappeared. I needed to see, to confirm, even though I already knew the truth. The cabin stood empty in the daylight, locked and silent, every surface undisturbed. There were no traces of our panic, our screams, our frantic calls to anyone who could hear. It was as though we had never been there at all. And yet, I could feel the residue of fear clinging to the air, the faint echo of voices that would never be answered, the pulse of shadows that existed just beyond perception. My partner, I couldn't even picture them clearly anymore. A name, a face, a scream, but all fragmented. I could see the outlines of our time in the cabin, flashes of panic, of whispered apologies, of promises we never kept to each other. And then, nothing. I tried to hold on to memory, but the edges blurred like the shadows themselves, shifting into a void that refused to be pinned down. I knew the authorities would file a report. They would say no one found, doors locked on the inside, nothing unusual detected. I would read it, nod silently, and feel the cold, creeping dread of truth, knowing that no report, no words, no evidence could capture what had happened, could explain the emptiness, the silence, the erasure. And that was the worst part. Not the fear, not the shadows, not even the knocking or the voices, but the knowledge that reality itself could be rewritten, that we could be erased and forgotten, leaving nothing but a pristine cabin in the woods, an ordinary house in the morning sun, that the forest had claimed us without leaving a trace. I took one last glance at the cabin before stepping back into the trees, hidden, unseen, and felt a cold, lingering certainty. Whatever waited inside wasn't finished. It had left its mark in absence, in the way the air carried tension, in the untraceable presence that refused to dissipate. I knew I would never return. I knew no one else could either. And I knew, deep in my bones, that some part of us, me, my partner, everything we'd been in that cabin, was still there, trapped in the shadows, unfindable, unexplainable, never be reclaimed. I turned, leaving the clearing, footsteps silent on the soft earth, carrying nothing but memory and fear. Behind me, the cabin waited, locked, empty and perfect, untouched by human understanding. The shadows had won. The world would never know, and the quiet, the dreadful, impossible quiet, would remain forever. The forest had a rhythm to it, a slow heartbeat beneath the canopy of green. Every step I took along the soft dirt path made a tiny whisper against the fallen leaves, a sound that felt almost alive, as if the woods themselves were listening. I kept glancing at the sky, where the sun hung low, spilling gold through the gaps in the branches. It should have felt peaceful. It should have felt like freedom. But there was a weight to the air, subtle, like the kind you notice when you've been holding your breath without realizing it. I dropped my pack near a clearing, the canvas of my small tent fluttering slightly as the wind picked up. Birds scattered in the distance, startled by something I couldn't see. I shrugged it off, telling myself it was nothing, just nerves, the isolation, the unfamiliar smells and sounds. I'd been hiking for hours, and all I wanted was to set up camp before darkness fell. My fingers fumbled with the tent poles, my mind wandering in little circles, remembering the drive-in, the lonely highway, the way the trees pressed close to the road like they were watching me the whole way here. The ground was soft but uneven, roots twisted under the soil like veins, some jutting out dangerously, waiting for an inattentive step. I tripped once, catching myself against a gnarled pine, and laughed at the ridiculousness of it, alone in the middle of nowhere, laughing at myself. Yet the sound didn't feel quite right. It bounced against the trunks and branches, distorted, almost uninvited. I shook my head. Focus. Set up the tent. Get the fire going. By the time the tent stood upright, bathed in the warm light of late afternoon, a strange calm had settled over the clearing. I stacked firewood, careful not to make too much noise, and arranged stones in a circle, the ritual of preparation both soothing and grounding. I kept glancing around, half expecting movement in the shadows at the edge of my vision. Branches swayed, leaves whispered, but when I looked, nothing was there. I laughed softly again, more to convince myself than anything else. The forest was old, the forest was patient, and I was alone. As I knelt by the fire pit, arranging kindling, I caught a glimpse of something, a shift in the corner of my eye, too fast and fleeting to identify. I froze, chest tightening, eyes scanning the tree line. The sun had dipped further, and shadows were stretching across the ground, elongating like black fingers reaching out. Nothing moved, yet a feeling of being watched wrapped around me, slow and persistent. I shook my head, telling myself it was just a trick of the light, just the way the forest bends at dusk. The first crackle of the fire, as I struck a match, was a small relief. The light flickered across my hands, the tent, the nearest trunks, casting long, wavering shadows. The warmth was comforting, almost human in its glow. I sat back on my heels, watching the flames dance. There's a rhythm here, too, the hiss of sap popping, the snap of a twig in the distance, but it felt like it was synchronized with the forest's watchful gaze. I tried to focus on simple things, the smell of smoke, the roughness of bark under my fingers, the taste of clean air in my lungs. Normal things, safe things. I noticed footprints in the soft soil, leading toward the clearing, shallow impressions, not mine. My stomach dropped. I stared, trying to convince myself they were animal tracks, deer maybe or raccoon, but the stride was too deliberate, too even, like someone had been pacing, watching. I stepped closer, leaning down to examine them, and felt the first prickles of real fear. There was no other sign of passage, no broken branches, no scuffed underbrush, just the footprints, leading to and stopping right at my fire circle. I swallowed hard, hammering. Maybe it was just the wind or rain from earlier. Maybe I'd imagined it. I forced a breath, rolling my shoulders, trying to shake the tension. I told myself stories. The footprints were from hikers, maybe campers passing earlier in the day. Nothing about this forest was unusual. It was all normal. Yet every shadow seemed sharper, deeper, as the sun disappeared completely behind the tree line. The light changed. The air grew heavier. A subtle scent of something faintly metallic lingered, and I realized it wasn't the forest that had changed. It was me. I was noticing, finally noticing, what the edges of the forest had been whispering all day. Night fell quickly. Stars emerged above, bright and indifferent, and the forest around me shifted again, silent now, listening. I fed the fire, each log dropping with a satisfying thump. Flames consuming, offering comfort. I thought I heard a branch crack close by. I froze, waited, nothing, waited longer. The forest breathed around me. I breathed with it, shallowly, carefully, unwilling to let my panic rise too high. I could feel eyes on me, a presence that wasn't human, not animal, but aware. My mind raced through rational explanations. Maybe a fox, maybe an owl, maybe the wind. But something deep in my gut refused to accept the ordinary. Something in the way the shadows moved, just beyond the circle of firelight, told me I wasn't alone. I clenched my jaw, telling myself to sit still, to watch, to wait. The fear was quiet now, simmering beneath my skin, a low hum that matched the whisper of leaves. I decided to explore the perimeter. Just a few steps beyond the clearing, flashlights sweeping in arcs. The beam cut through the dark, landing on trees, rocks, roots. Everything looked familiar. Everything looked normal. But the air was thick, almost tangible, and each step I took seemed to echo too loudly, as if the forest itself were listening to my heartbeat. I stopped, listened. Footsteps? No. Just the wind? Possibly. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, assessed, tested. Returning to the fire, I noticed the footprints again, only now they seemed fresher, pressed deeper into the earth. I hadn't moved, hadn't gone anywhere that would create new impressions. They were closer, almost at the edge of the firelight, tracing a line around my small campsite. I froze, eyes darting, pulse spiking. The rational mind wrestled with the instinct to run, to grab my pack, to vanish into forest. But some part of me, curiosity, stupidity, kept me rooted. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it a sound I couldn't place. A faint, deliberate knock, like a branch hitting wood. I froze again, tried to locate it, scanning the shadows. The fire flickered, throwing shapes across the clearing, shapes that didn't match the trees. I leaned closer to the flames, trying to convince myself it was my imagination, but it wasn't. Something was here. Something was moving just beyond the firelight, careful, patient. I thought about calling out, but my voice felt small, swallowed by the darkness. Instead, I settled back near the fire, tried to make sense of it. The forest was alive, yes, but in a way that felt deliberate, targeted. Each whisper of leaves, each subtle shift in shadow seemed to watch my reactions, to test my patience, my courage, my very presence. The fire offered safety, yes, but only in a small, fragile circle. Beyond that, the forest waited. Time stretched. Minutes, hours, I couldn't tell. Every crack of a branch, every rustle in the underbrush set my nerves taut. I told myself to breathe, to remain calm, to remember that humans had always camped here, alone and unafraid. But I wasn't just alone. I was observed, calculated. Something unseen was threading through the trees, aware of my every motion. And I realized with cold certainty that my day in the forest, my peaceful, perfect day, had been illusion. I watched the fire die down, tiny embers drifting into the night. The shadows at the edge of my vision grew longer, stretching, bending in impossible ways. The air pressed closer, the silence magnifying the smallest sounds. My skin prickled. I wanted to flee, but there was nowhere to go. The forest surrounded me, patient and quiet, waiting for night to decide what it would do next. Finally, I lay back on my sleeping pad, staring at the starless sky above the trees. I couldn't see what was moving in the dark, but I could feel it, every fiber of my body tuned to it. My heartbeat matched the rhythm of the forest, slow and deliberate, A reminder that I was alone and yet not alone at all. I closed my eyes, trying to imagine the warmth of home, the safety of walls, but the forest pressed closer, folding into my mind, whispering reminders that solitude was a fragile thing, easily shattered, easily claimed. Sleep didn't come. Not truly. The night stretched endlessly, full of whispered possibilities, the scent of damp earth, the ghosts of footsteps that might or might not be real. I remained awake, watching the fire, listening to the wind, feeling the forest gaze settle on me, and in that endless dark, I understood that peace in the woods was never permanent. It was borrowed, temporary, and the forest always took its due. The night pressed down hard, heavier than I remember it ever feeling in the forest. The tent flapped gently as the wind whispered through the trees, but it wasn't the wind that made my skin crawl. Something else was moving out there, something circling, shifting, patient. Every now and then, a twig snapped, soft, deliberate, almost like it was testing me. I held my breath, trying to convince myself it was an animal, maybe a deer, maybe a fox, but the rhythm didn't match anything I knew. I lay flat on my sleeping pad, eyes darting to the zipper. Every shadow beyond the fabric seemed alive. The beam of my headlamp, when I picked it up, trembled in my hands, cutting through the darkness in jerky arcs. Nothing, just the way the moonlight glinted off leaves, like tiny silver eyes blinking at me. I tried to steady my breathing, but my chest kept hitching, every inhale sharper than the last. Each snap of a branch, each whisper of leaves, made my stomach twist. I thought I heard something else. Breathing, slow, deliberate, somewhere beyond the edge of the tent. I froze, my heart hammering, trying to tell myself it was imagination. I had been alone before, alone on long hikes, alone in quiet forests. But this felt different. The forest was heavy with awareness tonight. It wasn't just alive, it was observing, calculating. The rustling moved again, circling the tent. I caught the faintest sound of gravel shifting underweight. Closer this time, almost beneath my feet. I gripped my flashlight tighter. Its faint glow shivered across the canvas, illuminating nothing but the familiar folds of nylon and the shadows of the nearby trees. Still I felt it, that presence, just beyond reach, watching, waiting. I wanted to call out, wanted to tell whoever or whatever it was to leave, but my voice caught in my throat. Even if there was someone there was no guarantee they would hear me or understand me. Maybe that's what terrified me most. Maybe there wasn't anyone. Maybe the forest itself had learned to breathe with me, to move with me, to hunt me with patience. I tried to distract myself, remembering mundane things, the light of the afternoon, the smell of smoke from the fire pit. I counted logs. I thought of the way the branches reached toward the sun, but each comforting image was pierced by the soft, methodical rustle circling outside, never pausing, never giving a pattern. It felt impossible to escape, like the darkness itself was alive and stretching around me. At one point, a shadow moved in the corner of the tent. Not a leaf, not a branch, something darker, slipping across the inside of my vision. I jerked my head and it vanished instantly. Nothing there, only the thin, trembling nylon separating me from the rest of the forest. I tried to laugh quietly, but it came out harsh, hollow. I told myself it was fatigue, isolation, the kind of fear your mind manufactures when you've been alone too long. I thought about the footprints I'd seen yesterday, leading close to my fire circle, stopping as though whoever or whatever had been here didn't want to be noticed. And now the circling, the deliberate, careful pacing of something alive, just beyond the light. The forest had shifted. It had remembered me. It had found me, and no rational explanation could make that weight disappear. I shifted slightly, trying to make the rustling more visible through movement. My foot nudged the edge of the sleeping pad. A sharp, scratching sound answered immediately from just beyond the tent. I froze. It was as though it had noticed me noticing. My heart roared in my chest. I could feel a tension building in the forest, subtle but undeniable, like the pause before a storm breaks. The shadows outside were no longer shadows. They moved independently, twisting over the folds of the tent, stretching impossibly long, then retreating when I tried to focus on them. I blinked, adjusted my eyes, but the motion persisted, deliberate, intelligent. I couldn't rationalize it. Nothing I knew of moved this way. The forest had rules. Animals had habits. The shadows I saw obeyed no law but observation. I considered leaving the tent, stepping outside, confronting whatever it was, but the thought made my stomach churn. I would have been stepping into a void, a darkness that had studied my pattern, learned my rhythm. No amount of light would reveal it, and so I stayed still, silent, pretending sleep was possible, hoping that stillness might earn me mercy. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time no longer made sense. Every snap of a twig, every whisper of leaves, every soft, irregular movement made me flinch. My flashlight lay across my chest now, the beam a thin shield, insufficient against the enormity of the dark around me. My mind drifted, grasping at explanations, rational and irrational alike. Had I imagined the footprints, the presence, or was something following me, learning me in the dim light, circling, waiting for me to make a mistake? At one point, I heard it, the softest scraping, like claws or fingernails on tree bark, moving clockwise around the tent. I pressed my ear to the nylon, straining. It didn't stop. The scraping didn't pause. Every sense screamed that it was close, just beyond reach, and yet invisible. My pulse thundered in my ears, matching the rhythm of the circling sound. I wanted to scream, to run, to flee into the forest and risk whatever waited out there. But I couldn't. I had nowhere to go. Then silence. A pause so complete it was terrifying. No wind, no leaves, no snapping branches. My ears strained, my skin crawling, the forest holding its breath along with me. And then, from the edge of my vision, a movement so subtle I almost doubted it. The shadows outside twisted, coiling like smoke, bending toward the tent as though testing the fabric. I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. I couldn't tell if it was real. I couldn't tell if I was still myself. I gripped my flashlight, shining it toward the movement, and saw nothing. Only the dark folds of the forest, blacker than any night I'd ever known, filled with impossible depth. I realized then that the rustling had a rhythm, a strategy. It came in waves, retreating when confronted, returning with patience. It wasn't mindless. It wasn't random. Something was thinking, waiting, watching, learning my fear and feeding on it. Sleep became impossible. My body ached with tension. Every muscle prepared to spring. But where would I go? I couldn't leave the fire, couldn't leave the tent. And even if I did, the forest had already mapped my presence, traced the pattern of my movements, known the exact width of my steps, the sound of my voice, the warmth of my body against the cold. I felt like prey in a cage, small and fragile against an intelligence that could wait forever. Hours, minutes, I lost count. Each movement outside, each whisper of leaves, each shadow brushing the edges of my awareness reinforced that the forest wasn't passive. It was patient. It was deliberate. It was alive in ways I couldn't comprehend. And it had circled me, night after night, hour after hour, tracing the small radius of my temporary life. At first light, I dared to peek outside. The ground was undisturbed except for the faintest marks of passage, barely visible in the pale morning light. Nothing approached the tent now. The shadows had receded. The rustling was gone. And yet, the forest felt aware still, like it had been waiting for me to wake. I knew I hadn't imagined it. The memory of the circling, the scraping, the shadows, etched into my mind, would never leave. I packed my gear silently, every movement cautious, every glance toward the tree leaned sharp. The forest loomed over me, vast and patient, watching even as the sun rose. I didn't speak. I didn't breathe loudly. I walked out of the clearing slowly, leaving no trace behind. But the memory of those hours, of the forest circling me while I lay helpless, would stay. And I knew that somewhere beyond the edges of my vision, the shadows had returned to their silent patrol, waiting for the next nightfall. And I understood something in that final moment before leaving the clearing completely. The forest does not forget. It records. It observes. And one day, it will remember me again. I didn't want to call. I didn't want anyone to know what was happening, because naming it made it real. But the movement outside the tent, subtle, deliberate, pushed me past reason. My hands shook so badly I had to grip the phone with both of them. The screen glowed weakly in the black. A pale promise of help I wasn't sure could arrive. 911, what's your emergency? The calm voice on the line was almost unbearable. So ordinary, so human. And my voice cracked, shaking, splitting over itself. Couldn't find the words. Someone's out there, I whispered. I don't know who. I think they're circling my tent. The words sounded ridiculous even as I said them. Who would believe a man describing shadows, whispers, the air itself moving like it was alive? But the sound of footsteps, soft, almost too soft, yet deliberate, answered me from outside. Sir, can you describe them? The operator asked. I could hear the typing in the background, the faint clicks that seemed miles away from a forest that had swallowed me whole. I don't know. I stopped. The movement shifted, not past the tent, not away, but closer, brushing the edges, almost like it was testing the fabric. My heart hammered in my ears, each beat a reminder of my fragility. I felt sweat run down my spine, cold and sticky. Sir? The voice nudged me back on the edge. I cleared my throat. I think it's circling me, around the tent. I don't know what it is. I've never seen anything like it. I couldn't take my eyes off the shadows outside. The dim moonlight made the trees look like blackened sentinels, each branch twitching independently, bending toward the tent when I glanced away. Okay, sir. Stay calm. Where you located? The words were measured. Even in their neutrality, I could feel my own panic magnifying. Location? GPS coordinates meant nothing to me here. I wasn't sure I could even leave the tent without stepping into something waiting for me. I'm at, I don't know, a campsite. I think it's somewhere near Black Pine Ridge. I gave a name, hoping it was enough. Hoping someone could understand the small fraction of danger I could articulate. Outside, a branch snapped. Close. Too close. I yelped, my hand slipping, dropping the phone onto my chest. My fingers fumbled to catch it, the flashlight bouncing in rhythm with my heartbeat. Sir, stay on the line. We need you to stay calm. The voice persisted. Professional. Human. Ordinary. None of it matched the extraordinary fear gnawing at my senses. I tried to explain, pointing the beam of my flashlight through the tent walls, scanning for any movement. Every shadow flinched. Every leaf rustled in response. Something was responding to me, to my fear. My voice quivered as I spoke again. I see it, something moving. Shadows. They're circling. They vanish if I look directly at them. But they're there. I feel them watching me. A pause on the other end. Even the operator had no response to that. I could feel it in my chest, in my throat. Disbelief, a tiny pause of uncertainty that made me feel even smaller. So, is anyone else there with you? The voice asked. My mind flicked to the sleeping bag across the tent. Empty. He hadn't come back from wherever he wandered off to. The forest was patient, and he was gone. My pulse spiked. No, I'm alone. It's just me. Please, help me. My whisper was nearly swallowed by the tent, by the rustling, by the darkness pressing close against nylon walls. Every sound outside was amplified. Footsteps crunching over leaves, a branch scraping across the tent seam, a subtle scraping that could have been fingernails or claws, or just wind. But I knew it wasn't wind. I knew it. Sir, I need you to stay calm. Can you step outside? Calm, neutral, impossibly calm. I shook my head. The thought of stepping into that darkness. No, I couldn't. The rustling outside quickened for a moment, then slowed, almost like it noticed my hesitation, waiting, judging. I can't leave the tent. My hands were shaking so hard the phone rattled against my chest. My flashlight illuminated nothing beyond the canvas. And yet, I could feel the movement, the intelligence circling. Around me, patient, testing, waiting for me to break. Sir, stay on the line. Help is on the way. The words should have been reassuring. They weren't. Each syllable felt like it stretched time thinner, making every snap outside seem louder, sharper. Every whisper of leaves became an accusation, a reminder that I was visible in some way I didn't understand. I tried to describe it more clearly. It's not human. I don't think it's human. The shadows, they move independently. I cut myself off as a shadow brushed across the edge of my vision. My flashlight wavered. I blinked. Nothing. But I felt it leaning in, pressing against the limits of the tent. My stomach sank. I wanted to scream, to tell someone the forest itself had learned to move with me, to track me, to play me. A noise, a scraping deliberate, right at the base of the tent. I could see the outline of movement, subtle, bending like smoke, coiling around the stakes. I swallowed hard, trying to breathe through the terror. The operator's voice was calm, but distant now, drowned out by the rustling and become a language I didn't understand, but felt in every nerve. "Sir, keep the line open. Tell me what you see." I see shadows bending, twisting around the tent. They vanish if I look directly at them, but they're moving, always moving, circling me. My voice was trembling. I couldn't even articulate the full shape of my fear. I couldn't even comprehend it. And yet, every inch of me felt the intelligence of those shadows. Alive, patient, observing. There was a long pause outside. A single snap, like a branch under a careful weight. Then silence. The kind of silence that doesn't feel empty, but like it's waiting, measuring, judging. My heart roared in my chest. My hands gripped the phone tighter. Knuckles white, sweat running down my palms. "Help is close, sir. Stay calm. Stay where you are," the operator said. I nodded, though they couldn't see me. Couldn't know how impossible it was to be calm while every sound, every shadow, every twitching branch demanded my attention, mocked my reason, played with my terror. I tried to reason with myself. Thought about the first light of morning, about leaving the forest when it was visible, but the forest had other plans. The rustling returned, slower now, measured, deliberate. It moved differently, aware of my focus, vanishing when I tried to track it, leaving empty air in the beam of my flashlight. I realized then that it didn't need to be seen to be terrifying. Its existence alone, its persistence was enough. Minutes or hours, I couldn't tell, passed. I kept talking, whispering details, trying to anchor myself to reality. It's moving clockwise. No, counterclockwise. It pauses when I look, but I can feel it, always there, waiting. My voice quavered. My pulse throbbed. Every nerve ending burned with the need to survive. Then, a faint rustle closer to the entrance of the tent. I froze, flashlight trembling, breath caught halfway. Something pressed against some nylon, soft, deliberate, unrelenting. I could feel it outside, just beyond the thin barrier. The operator said something, but I couldn't hear over the pounding in my ears. I wanted to move, to flee, to tear the tent and run, but I couldn't. I was trapped. I whispered into phone, voice nearly lost. "It's at the tent, right here. Please don't leave me." And then nothing. A pause. Silence. So complete it became a wait. The shadows didn't move. The rustling stopped. The night held its breath. My pulse slowed slightly, just enough to notice the absence of noise. My mind raced. Had it left? Was it hiding? Was it patient enough to wait another hour, another day, another lifetime? I spoke softly, repeating the coordinates, the name of the clearing, the exact description of my position. The operator's voice returned, distant but steady. "Help is on the way, sir. Stay with me. Stay calm." I nodded, feeling a flicker of relief, brief and fragile. But even as I whispered, I knew the forest had not released me. The rustling had paused, yes, but its patience was infinite, its observation unbroken. I tried to focus on small details, the smell of wet pine, the texture of my sleeping bag, the faint light of my flashlight, but the memory of circling shadows pressed against my mind. I realized the forest wasn't just a place. It was an intelligence, a living entity that measured, recorded, waited, and I had been marked. Hours later, or maybe minutes, a distant sound, voices, human voices. Relief surged through me. Rescue, someone coming. But my joy was tempered by unease. The rustling hadn't stopped. It had only paused. and the memory of its patience lingered, a promise that even the arrival of humans could not undo. I whispered into the phone, trying to anchor myself to the human world. They're coming. I can hear them. Outside, a shadow moved just beyond the thin light, slow and deliberate, vanishing as I blinked. The operator urged me to stay on the line, to make my presence known. My flashlight shook, the beam trembling, illuminating nothing but the air around me. The shadows waited. The forest waited. I waited, and no help would arrive. I knew it wouldn't bring release. The knowledge of being watched, circled, studied, of being insignificant and observed would linger, always, even as I heard the footsteps of the approaching rescuers. I couldn't shake the awareness that the forest's patience would outlast them, and it would not forget. The line went dead, mid-sentence. My words swallowed by static, replaced by the oppressive quiet that had been following me since dusk. I pressed the phone to my ear, tapping it, whispering, shaking, but the dial tone answered only with emptiness. Not a click, not a voice, just nothing. Outside the tent, the forest continued its quiet menace, but it felt different. The rustling, the circling shadows, the subtle pressure. I could almost sense them recoiling, as if satisfied, amused, waiting. My chest tightened. My heartbeat pounded like a drum in the stillness, louder than any wind or animal could ever be. I tried the 911 number again, my fingers trembling, fumbling with the phone. The screen blinked, signal weak, fading, then nothing. Total silence. I realized then that I was completely alone. Truly alone. The thought clawed at me. Not even the operator, not even human oversight, could reach me here. Panic flared, short and violent. My eyes darted around the tent. Every shadow inside seemed heavier, darker, more substantial. I could feel them pressing into the nylon, bending reality just slightly, enough that I couldn't trust my senses. I whispered my own name, almost to test if I was still human, still anchored, and the sound returned hollow, echoing against the fabric like a warning. I forced myself to remember my gear, my surroundings, every detail I could, the flashlight, the sleeping bag, the small cooler tucked in the corner. But the more I focused, the more the familiar felt strange. The air smelled sharper, like ozone before a storm, or was at the center of my own fear. And then I heard it, not movement, not footsteps, silence, so absolute it pressed against my ears. But in that silence, I could feel a presence. Not one shadow, not one creature, but multiple, observing, waiting. The forest had turned itself into a cage, and I was inside, unguarded, exposed. Hours, or maybe minutes, passed. I tried calling again. Nothing. I tried screaming. The sound bounced back at me, absorbed by the trees. I realized then that the forest had taken everything from me except awareness. Awareness of my vulnerability, my insignificance. The panic wasn't just in my mind anymore. It had a shape, a weight. Then headlights, distant at first, flashing through the trees, moving toward the clearing. Relief surged, electric and dangerous. I scrambled from the tent, waving my arms, shouting, my voice cracking, breaking under the tension. Help was finally coming. I could see their figures now, silhouetted against the vehicle lights. The headlights stopped at the edge of the clearing. Figures moved toward the tent, shouting, asking my name, trying to find me. Relief was instant, overwhelming. Then, as I ran toward them, my stomach dropped. The tent was empty, completely empty. The sleeping bag, the cooler, the flashlight, all gone. Nothing remained inside but the empty, stretched fabric of the tent itself. My voice caught in my throat. I looked down at my hands, still clutching the phone, still trembling. I realized I hadn't seen them leave. Not him, not me, not anyone. And the forest was silent again, waiting. The authorities approached cautiously, flashlights cutting arcs through the darkness. They asked questions, but I couldn't answer. How do you explain shadows that vanish when you look at them? How do you account for a friend who was beside you one moment and gone the next without a trace? I could only shake, pointing at the empty tent, trying to convey what couldn't be conveyed. One officer knelt, examining the ground. No footprints, he said. Nothing leading away. not even under the fabric. My mind spun. If no one had left, then where were they? And if they weren't here, then what had been circling me, pressing at the edges of perception, laughing in some alien patience? The silence stretched, thick and impossible. I could feel eyes, or the memory of eyes, following me, watching, patient and eternal. I wanted to run, but every step felt heavier, burdened with knowledge that the forest was infinite, and I was finite, insignificant. Every sound from the approaching authorities was a contrast, a human attempt to reclaim order, but it felt futile against the memory of that relentless presence. I tried to explain what I'd seen, what I'd felt, the circling shadows, the vanishing movements, the pressure at the tent walls, the way the forest seemed to respond to my fear. They listened politely, nodding, scribbling notes, taking statements, but I could see the disbelief behind their eyes. How could they understand what had no form, no evidence, no trace beyond the memory it left in me? A slight breeze rustled the treetops. I felt it pass over my skin, cold and deliberate. My stomach knotted. The shadows hadn't gone. They never left. The forest didn't relinquish what it took. It simply waited for the next moment, the next opening, the next lapse in awareness. I could feel them, lurking in the peripheral of my mind, patient, eternal. The officers finally radioed in, confirming the campsite was empty. No signs of struggle, no footprints, no trace of my friend, no trace of me or anyone else. They looked at me, a mix of concern and disbelief, as if they were trying to decide whether to believe the story or write it off as hysteria. I knew I would never write it off. The memory would not leave me. The forest would not let me. I was escorted back to the vehicle, forced to leave the clearing, leave the tent, leave every detail behind. The headlights cut arcs through the dark as I glanced back one last time. The clearing was still, silent, and yet I could feel it moving, watching, waiting. The shadows had returned to their patient patrol, and I was powerless to stop it, powerless to comprehend it fully. On the drive back, I tried to speak, to explain the fear, the moments of impossible awareness, but my words sounded hollow in the vehicle, trapped between reality and memory. Every rustle of leaves, every flash of darkness outside reminded me of the patient presence that had taken my friend, that had tested me, and that now waited for the next opportunity. I realized then that the forest wasn't just a place. It was a consciousness, infinite and unyielding. It observed, it measured, it waited, and those who entered its domain were never fully theirs again. Not entirely. Back in the warmth of human civilization, with lights, vehicles, voices, and the mundane clamor of life, I could still feel it. The memory of pressure against nylon, the sense of being circled, the vanishing shadows. I could almost hear them whisper in my mind, patient, amused, eternal. The authorities called it a missing persons case. I called it a lesson in futility. But deep down, I knew the truth. Some presences are indifferent to human intervention. Some fears cannot be resolved, only survive in fragments of memory and sleepless nights. And as the car carried me farther from the clearing, the forest receding into darkness, I couldn't shake the certainty that nothing had ended. The shadows were still there, watching, waiting, and I had been marked. Even now, when I close my eyes, I can see the movement, circling, patient, unrelenting, waiting. The road was empty, stretching ahead like a black ribbon stitched into the night. My headlights barely cut through the fog, settling low among the pines. Shortcut, I told myself. Fewer miles, faster route. But as soon as I turned off the highway, the familiar comfort of asphalt vanished. Only gravel, potholes, and trees that pressed in from both sides. I gripped the wheel tighter. My rig groaned over the uneven road. Somewhere ahead, a sign swung in the wind, half rotted, the letters barely legible. Logging road, authorized vehicles only. I'd passed it without thinking, chasing minutes instead of safety. Now the forest felt alive, dense, and watchful. The radio played static between songs, crackling like tiny whispers. I kept flicking the dial, trying to catch a station, anything to break the silence. But it wasn't just silence. It was thicker than that, the kind that presses against your ears, your chest, makes the air taste heavy. A branch scraped the side of the truck, not hard enough to dent, just enough to make me flinch. I told myself it was the wind, just the wind, but then I saw it. A shadow flitting across the shoulder, too fast to be a deer. My pulse spiked. I blinked. Nothing, only trees and fog. I tried to focus on the road. The beams of my headlights cut through the mist in weak yellow lines, illuminating nothing but empty road. Still, the feeling lingered, like eyes tracing every inch of metal and glass, waiting. Waiting for what? I couldn't say. My rig rattled over a deep pothole, jolted me in the seat. I cursed, heart hammering. I glanced in the mirrors. Just darkness. Then movement, just beyond the taillights. Something darted between trees, faster than any animal should move. I slammed on the brakes. Tires skidding, gravel spraying, and the figure disappeared. I tried to rationalize it. Logging trucks. Hunters. My imagination. Midnight fatigue. But there was a certainty and emotion I couldn't shake, an intelligence in the way it moved, like it knew I was watching, like it was testing me. The forest narrowed. Trees leaned closer. Branches clawed at the sky, silhouetted against the foggy moonlight. My headlights barely penetrated the darkness. I felt the truck sag as I descended a dip, the engine humming low. Then I heard it, a tapping, light and rhythmic, on the roof of the trailer. I froze. Tapping. I whispered to myself. Wind, debris. But it wasn't wind. The tapping followed me, moving from the front of the trailer to the back in seconds, impossible speed. My hand shook on the wheel. The radio flare was static, a high-pitched whine that stabbed my ears, then dead silence. I told myself to breathe, try to focus. 1 more mile, then back to the main road. 1 more mile, and this would all make sense. The GPS showed a curve ahead, a bridge over a creek. That should be familiar. That should be safe. And then headlights. Sudden blinding. Oncoming? No, too close. Too fast. No sound of tires. Only light. And it reflected in the mirrors, filling the cab with a harsh white glare. My stomach twisted. I slammed the brakes again, skidding across gravel, the truck shaking violently. And it was gone. Nothing but empty road, mist curling in the headlights' wake. I laughed nervously, shaking my head. Midnight paranoia. That's all it was. Fatigue. Old roads. Old trucks. Old ghosts in my mind. Nothing real. I should have turned back then. I should have. But I didn't. I kept driving. The road wound tighter. Dips and rises, like the forest was trying to unbalance me. I passed a fallen sign. Painted white letters faded. Do not enter private. Too late now. I was in. The tapping returned, but this time inside the cab. Not the trailer, not the roof. Inside. My hands clutched the wheel, knuckles white. The dashboard flickered, lights dimming then brightening, like a heartbeat. I whisper my own name, trying to anchor myself. Ahead, the road forked. GPS showed both options, neither marked clearly. I chose left, instinct. Left meant longer, but safer, I told myself. I told myself anything to move forward, and that's when I saw it. Reflected in the passenger side mirror, a figure impossibly thin, standing between trees, just a few feet from a road. I slammed on the horn. Nothing. It didn't move, didn't blink, just stared. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. I floored the gas, tires throwing gravel, engine screaming, and the figure vanished. No rustle of leaves, no movement, just gone, and the air, thick cold, pressing against the cab like fingers. I tried the radio again. Static, white noise, then a voice, distant, distorted, almost like it was speaking directly in my ear. Turn back! I froze, heart pounding, every muscle tight. I couldn't place the voice. No accent, no gender, just the words, insistent and slow. Turn back. I shook my head violently. No, just a trick, just a trick. The forest closed in, more trees, more darkness, branches brushing the mirrors, scratching the cab. My headlights caught glimpses of movement, shadows that didn't belong, stretching, bending around trees, disappearing the moment I focused on them. I passed another fork. GPS was useless now. I didn't know which way. My chest ached, panic gnawing. And then a tree, The massive trunk of one leaned impossibly across the road, a barricade I hadn't seen in time. I swerved hard, tires screeching, trucks sliding, gravel spraying. And as I regained control, I realized I'd gone full circle. Same spot, same emptiness. I slammed on the brakes, exhaled shakily, tried to rationalize, logging detours, old maps, fatigue, nothing real, nothing that could explain it. Then the tapping returned, louder, deliberate, from the trailer this time. Metal against metal. A rhythm, not random, not wind. I forced myself to breathe, hands white on the wheel, eyes darting. My headlights caught movement again. Something moving just beyond the tree line. Too fast to follow, impossible to track. And the voice returned, whispering from everywhere, nowhere. "Why are you here?" I screamed, and the sound was swallowed instantly by the fog. The truck seemed heavier, the air thickening around me. My eyes darted the mirrors, nothing. But I knew it was there, watching, waiting, testing. I had trespassed, crossed into territory I didn't understand. And the forest, the road, the dark, it knew. Hours passed. Minutes. I had no sense of time. The road twisted endlessly. Every turn brought the same emptiness, the same shadows, the same impossible awareness of being observed. I tried to call someone, anyone, but the phone had died hours ago. No signal, no help, only me and the road and the weight of the forest around me. And then, ahead, a light, another vehicle, headlights cutting through fog, approaching slow. Relief surged. I pressed a horn, flashlights, no response. And as I neared, the light revealed nothing. No car, no person, only more forest, more darkness, and a path that seemed to stretch farther than possible. I realized then that there would be no escape. Not yet, not tonight. The forest had no exit. The road had no end. Only endless repetition, endless observation, endless testing of my fear, my sanity, my very will to survive. And as I gripped the wheel, sweat pouring down my face, I understood a truth I would never forget. Shortcuts aren't always faster. And sometimes the road you take in darkness doesn't lead anywhere at all, except deeper in. I slammed the brakes before I even realized I had to. Headlights cut through the fog, illuminating the shape that had frozen my blood. A person, or what looked like one, standing in the middle of the road, completely still. No shift of weight, no blink, just watching. I leaned on the horn. The sound bounced back at me, swallowed by the forest. The figure didn't move. Not an inch. Not a twitch. My chest tightened. The rig's engine was the only sound now, low and steady. But inside it felt like the world had gone silent, holding its breath. I considered turning around. Any sane driver would. But the road curved behind me into darkness I didn't know, and my headlights cut a path straight into that impossible figure. There was something wrong about it. Something impossible. I slowly inched the truck forward. The tires crunched over gravel. The closer I got, the more unnatural it felt. The fog around it seemed to cling to the body, as if it weren't entirely part of this world. I couldn't see a face. Just a silhouette, tall, thin, motionless. Then my lights flickered weakly, like the rig itself was protesting. And when they returned, the figure was gone. Just gone. My stomach dropped. My eyes scanned the roadside, fog, trees, nothing. My heart raced. Did it move, or did I imagine it? I shook my head. Fatigue. Midnight. Stress. That had to be it. Just a hitchhiker, maybe someone who had wandered out from a logging site. My pulse slowed slightly. I shook my hands out the steering wheel and tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. The rig groaned over another pothole, jolted me back into tension. Then headlights again behind me, flickering in the rear view mirror. Someone or something following. My pulse spiked. I glanced back. Empty road. Nothing. Just fog, curling like smoke over the tree line. I tried to focus on the road ahead, but my mind refused to settle. Every shadow flickered at the corner of my vision. Every tree looked like it leaned closer, stretching its arms across the asphalt. I kept expecting the figure to appear again, and every second it didn't, the tighter my chest became. And then a sound, low at first, but unmistakable. Footsteps, crunching gravel, synchronized with mine, but too fast to be human. I jerked my eyes to the mirrors. Nothing. I swallowed hard. My hands gripped the wheel until my knuckles ached. A branch snapped somewhere off the road. My rig jolted again, tires skidding slightly. I told myself it was just the forest, wind, animals, anything to rationalize it. But the feeling remained. Someone, something, moving with me, just beyond my sight, just beyond my mind's ability to understand. The fog thickened suddenly, rolling in waves, hugging the truck. Headlights barely pierced more than a few feet. My mirrors reflected shadows that didn't match the trees, shapes that seemed to move independent of logic. My stomach twisted. Was the figure back there? Watching? Waiting? I forced myself to speak aloud, shaky, to anchor myself. It's okay. It's okay. Just a hitchhiker. Just someone out here. The words felt empty. I knew they were empty. The forest was alive with silence, a dense pressure that pressed against my chest. And then I saw it again just at the edge of the beams, between two leaning pines. A shadow taller than any human should be, unnaturally still. I swerved. Gravel sprayed. The rig groaned. I slammed the brakes, heart hammering. The figure didn't move, didn't react. Just stood there, watching, waiting. My pulse was deafening in my ears. I couldn't breathe, couldn't look away. And then it stepped aside. Just once. A single motion. Smooth, deliberate. And the road was empty. My pulse raced. I blinked. The headlights stretched into fog. Nothing. Only the endless road curling ahead. I kept driving. Faster this time. Tires crunching gravel. Engine screaming in protest. Every shadow at the edge of my vision teased me. Every rustle of leaves sounded like a footstep. Every bend in the road made me flinch. I tried to rationalize. Maybe a hunter? Maybe another trucker hiding? But nothing matched what I'd seen. The next curve revealed the road ahead bathed in the weak glow of the moon. And there it was again, standing just beyond the fog, this time closer. My stomach dropped. I tried to swerve, but the truck resisted. The tires slid over gravel. My hands shook so badly I couldn't steer straight. I leaned forward, squinting. No face, no features, just blackness in the shape of a human. And yet it felt intelligent, watching, waiting, testing me. I hit the horn, lights flashing, desperate. Nothing, just standing there. I tried call someone, anyone, phone dead. No signal, only the rig and the road. Only the forest pressing in, the fog swallowing every sound except my own panicked heartbeat. And then the radio flickered. Static, a high-pitched whine. Then words, soft, almost beneath my hearing, whispering, "Why are you here?" I jerked back. "What?" My voice cracked. The rig rattled. The dashboard lights dimmed, then brightened in erratic bursts, like a heartbeat. The voice came again, closer, clearer, impossible to locate. "Why are you here?" I floored the gas. The tires threw gravel. The engine roared, and the fog seemed to split around the rig, bending and curling in impossible ways. Shadows moved against the edges of my headlights, stretching, shifting, twisting. My stomach churned. I wanted to escape, to tear out of the forest, to leave this road, this nightmare. The figure appeared in the rear-view mirror this time, impossibly close, standing between the trees just a few feet behind. My hands gripped the wheel so tight I could feel my bones. I swerved hard. Gravel sprayed. The rig screamed. The figure stayed, motionless, impossibly precise. I realized then that it wasn't following. It wasn't behind. It was everywhere. The fog carried it. The trees carried it. The shadows carried it. My mind screamed in disbelief. I couldn't understand it. Couldn't make sense of it. Only fear, raw and unrelenting, pulsed through me. Minutes, hours, time ceased to exist. Every turn led to the same darkness, the same pressure, the same figure appearing in ways I could not anticipate. I tried to shut my eyes, tried to will it away, tried to wake up. Nothing. Then headlights again. Another vehicle, or maybe the same one, approaching slow, low on the road. Relief flickered in me. I pressed the horn, flashed my lights. Nothing responded. As I drew closer, The lights revealed nothing. No car, no person. Only more fog, more trees, more shadows that didn't belong. I forced myself to breathe, try to focus on the road, on the wheel, on anything solid. The figure appeared in the periphery again, thin, black, still testing me. And in that moment, I understood I had trespassed, taken a shortcut, and now I was no longer in control. The rig's engine shook, the tires skidded, my vision narrowed. The forest seemed to lean closer, branches brushing mirrors, scraping the cab. The figure moved with a precision no human could manage, appearing just ahead, just behind, just at the corner of my eyes. And I realized, horror settling in my gut, that there might be no end to this road. No exit, only endless loops, endless observation, endless testing of my fear, my will, my sanity. I forced myself to speak aloud, to remind myself I was still alive, still human. I'm leaving. I'm leaving. But the figure didn't respond. It didn't move. It waited. And I understood, the way you understand something that cannot be explained, that this road was no longer mine. The shortcut was gone. The forest had claimed it. Claimed me. I gripped the wheel, knuckles white, heart hammering, and drove faster, endlessly. And the figure was there in the fog, in the mirrors, in the shadows, always just beyond comprehension. I fumbled for my phone, hands shaking so badly I could barely swipe the screen. My voice caught in my throat, heart hammering against ribs like it wanted out. I dialed 911 on instinct, though I wasn't sure who I was even calling. 911, what's your emergency? A calm voice answered. Too calm. Wrongly calm. There's someone on the road. A figure in the headlights. I choked. Gripping the wheel, eyes darting to the fog ahead. The shape had been there, then gone, then back, like some cruel trick of the mist. Sir, can you describe the location? The operator's voice was patient. Professional. I don't know. Logging road, northeast of Highway 47, the shortcut through. My words tumbled out like rocks rolling downhill. Every word seemed too slow for the panic coiling in my chest. I caught it again in the rear view. Just a shadow, thin, unnaturally tall. No movement. And then it vanished. Just like that. My stomach dropped. It's moving. Or I don't know. It disappears. I can't. Sir, stay calm. Take a deep breath. Calm. Too calm. How could anyone stay calm when something was bending reality outside your windshield? I did as instructed. Inhale. Exhale. But the sound of the tires on gravel, the groan of the rig's engine, and the whispers of fog-laden wind outside made me feel like the world was spinning around me. Sir, can you tell me if anyone else is there? Any vehicles? I squinted into the mist. No lights, no motion, nothing. The forest had swallowed the road behind me. It felt alive, pressing, moving. No one. Just me and something out there. A branch cracked somewhere on my right, and I yelped. My heart leapt. The figure? Another presence? I didn't dare look. My hands were slick on the wheel. I gripped tighter. My pulse rattled in my ears louder than the engine. I can see it sometimes. I whispered into the phone, voice low, trembling. It appears in the fog. Then it's gone. Then it's behind me. Or in front. I can't. My words faltered as the headlights flickered. And then it was gone again. The road stretched empty before me. Relief surged, brief and sharp, before my chest clenched. How could something vanish and reappear? How could it move like that without stepping? Sir, are you alone? Yes, I'm alone. I pressed, feeling ridiculous, absurd, but fear doesn't ask for logic. I swallowed hard. My lips were dry, mouth stuck in a tight knot. I don't understand. I just need someone. Static cut in. A whisper, soft, almost beneath the phone. Why are you here? I froze. My voice caught. What? The operator's voice came again, calm, human. Sir, are you okay? I looked up through the windshield. The fog had thickened, curling around the rig, distorting the beams. And there was again, just beyond the range of the headlights, darker than dark, taller than any human should be, standing still, watching, waiting. I pressed the horn. Headlights flashed. Nothing. It didn't move, didn't flinch, and then it stepped aside. A single motion. The road ahead was empty. My pulse raced. My hands shook so badly I thought I'd dropped the phone. I can't see it, I whispered. Relief trickled in. Maybe it was gone for good. Maybe it had never been there. Maybe I was losing my mind. And then I felt it. Eyes at the back of my head. Unblinking, impossible. I didn't dare look. The phone slipped slightly from my grip. My knuckles whitened as I pressed it back. "Sir, stay on the line. Help is on the way," the operator said. Calm, reassuring, but miles away from the terror crawling through me. "Please, please hurry." My voice cracked. I forced myself to keep it steady, though my chest heaved. Every fiber of me screamed to abandon the rig, the road, the world entirely. But the forest outside was not a place for walking. Not tonight. The tires crunched over gravel. Shadows stretched in the periphery, moving in ways my mind couldn't accept. A low rustle. Footsteps? No footsteps. I dared not look. The figure, or whatever it was, had vanished again. I tried to focus, tried to describe the forest for the operator. Tall trees, fog-thick, branches leaning in, twisting. Gravel road, potholes, curves. Every word felt insufficient, inadequate. Like nothing I could say could explain what was happening. And then my headlights flickered again. I blinked. The figure was there, standing just beyond the fog, closer than before. Still, unmoving, impossible. I stammered into the phone. It's here. Right there. I see it. Please. My voice faltered. Static. Whisper. Why are you here? I yelped. Slammed my hand on the horn. The sound ricocheted through the fog, bouncing from tree to tree. The rig shook under my hands. The voice was gone, replaced by the steady, terrifying silence of the forest. "Sir?" the operator asked. "Are you still there?" "Yes, I'm still." I stopped. My voice caught again. In the rear view mirror, a shape. Not behind, not ahead. Somewhere impossible. And then gone. My stomach dropped. Time itself seemed fractured. I drove faster. Gravel sprayed. The engine screamed. Shadows twisted against the edges of the headlights, stretching, elongating. Each bend revealed more shapes, more fog, more impossibilities. I realized then that I wasn't being followed. I was trapped inside the forest, inside the fog, inside something that had no respect for direction or space. I don't understand, I whispered into the phone. Relief, terror, hope, and despair collided inside me. It keeps vanishing, then it's here, then gone. I can't. Static again. Whisper, why are you here? My hands gripped the wheel until my knuckles cracked. My teeth ground together. Every nerve in my body screamed. Every instinct told me to run, to abandon the rig, the road, the world entirely. But the fog closed in, pressing, bending. The rig was the only thing keeping me alive. The only thing I had. Minutes blurred. The operator's voice guided me, anchored me. But every instruction, every reassurance, was like a lifeline tossed across an infinite void. The road twisted. The trees leaned. The shadows stretched. And the figure, always there, always testing, always watching. I realized then, in the slow, horrifying clarity of exhaustion and panic, that this wasn't just a person. It wasn't just a shape. It was something else entirely. Something that existed in the gaps between light and shadow, between thought and reality. Something patient, deliberate, waiting for me to break. The radio flickered once more. Static. Whisper. Why are you here? I screamed. My voice shattered against the fog. And in that moment, relief and terror twisted together. I was alive. I was conscious. I was screaming into nothing. And yet, the forest, the fog, the figure, they weren't done with me. I forced myself to focus. One word at a time. I'm leaving. I'm leaving. Please. Just please. And then headlights again. Not mine. Not approaching, not receding. Somewhere, somewhere impossible, and I realized with sick certainty that the forest had changed the rules. Time, space, distance, they were irrelevant here, and no one, not even the operator, could save me from what waited just beyond comprehension. I slammed my foot down, tires biting into gravel that sprayed like tiny missiles. The forest closed in around me, shadows folding over the rig like hands. Every bend revealed nothing, yet I could feel it. Still there, always there. The fog had thickened into a wall, curling and twisting like smoke from some impossible fire. The radio crackled faintly, the operator's voice distant, almost drowned in static. "Sir, can you describe?" I cut the sound off with a flick of a switch. I didn't need calm advice. I needed escape. I needed to put distance between me and whatever had taken residence in the dark. Branches scraped the sides of the cab, leaving streaks on the paint, scratching, teasing. I flinched, jerking the wheel. The rig groaned, and for a moment, I thought the sound was coming from behind me. From it, the forest was alive with echoes bouncing, folding, distorting. Every noise was amplified, every creak a whisper of danger. I tried to focus on the road, the only thing tangible. Gravel crunched under tires, mist curling at the edges of the headlights, but the road itself seemed to stretch, lengthen. The figure, or whatever it was, had vanished again. Relief hit for a second. A trick of the mind, maybe, but the weight of its gaze pressed at the back of my skull, insisting it wasn't gone. And then came the sound. A branch snapping, but wrong. Slow, deliberate, measured. Not like a deer, not like wind. I turned my head just enough to catch the flash of black between trees. Too tall, too still, waiting, watching. I pressed harder on the accelerator. Gravel sprayed. Mist churned like liquid smoke. The rig's headlights cut through nothing. And then another sound, this time behind me. Not soft, heavy, footsteps, or something that sounded like them, and always echoing wrong. Too close, too far, bouncing through the trees like the forest itself was mocking me. I swallowed hard, fingers tightening on the wheel. My voice trembled, muttering nonsense under breath. It can't be real. It can't be. A shadow flickered across the windshield, long, narrow, impossibly distorted. My stomach flipped. I slammed on the brakes. The rig screeched. Gravel sprayed. My heartbeat thundered in my ears louder than the engine. The shape disappeared. The road stretched empty before me. And still, I knew it hadn't left. Not really. I tried to reason, to think. Keep it calm. Keep it moving. Eyes forward. Focus on the road. But the forest, every tree leaned in, branches like reaching fingers, leaves whispering secrets I couldn't understand. The road narrowed, twisted unnaturally. I blinked and it seemed longer, darker. Each turn became identical, each shadow more menacing. My hand shook so badly I almost dropped the wheel. I glanced at the rearview mirror. Mist swirled. For a second, I thought I saw it there, standing, watching, then gone. Impossible. But my gut screamed it hadn't left. Not for a second. I forced myself to breathe. 1, 2, 3. The operator's voice flickered through the radio. "Sir, are you still on the road?" "Yes." I shouted. My voice cracked. Something, static. "Whisper. Why are you running?" I froze. My knuckles whitened. The voice was familiar. Wrongly familiar. I slammed a hand to the horn. It screamed. The sound bounced off the trees, ricocheting, making shadows leap and twist. And the whisper came again, closer this time, unreasonably close. "Why are you running?" Gravel sprayed as I slammed back on the accelerator. The rig jolted. Trees blurred past. Shadows stretched unnaturally, leaning in. Every branch, every tree seemed alive. Closing in, I forced myself to focus on the faint glimmer of road ahead. Only the road mattered. And then a flash. Something black, taller than any man should be, slipped between the headlights. Not walking, sliding, moving in ways my mind couldn't compute. I jerked the wheel. The rig fishtailed. Gravel sprayed. Tires screamed. My chest tightened, throat dry. I pressed on. Faster. Mist curling, branches scraping, echoes bouncing. My heart hammered like a drumline in my chest. Every nerve on fire. I could hear it following. Breathing? Footsteps? Or the forest itself conspiring against me? I couldn't tell. I didn't dare. The road twisted again. Gravel crunched under the tires. And then silence. The sudden stillness made my stomach lurch. Too quiet. No echoes. No fog whispers. No hint of presence. I blinked. Faint moonlight struggled through the fog. Shadows lay flat. Relief surged, brief and sharp, before my chest tightened again. How could something vanish and yet feel closer than ever? A shadow flickered in the corner of my eye. Gone when I turned, mist curling around it like smoke. Too fast, too deliberate. I realized with a sickening certainty that this wasn't just following, it was shaping the forest around me. Every curve, every branch, every shadow was under its control. I yelled into the cab. My own voice echoed back at me, distorted. I could feel it laughing in that silence. The rig groaned over gravel. Every sound now distorted, too loud, too close, too wrong. My pulse rattled my skull. I glanced at the rearview mirror. Mist, shadows, movement, and then nothing. I swallowed, blinked, fumbled for the radio. Static, whisper, "Why are you running?" I screamed, horn blaring, tires skidding. The forest blurred into a liquid nightmare. Trees bending, twisting toward me. Shadows wrapping around the rig, like fingers trying to pry me free. My hands were slick with sweat. Knuckles cracked on the wheel. My teeth ground together. Another flash. In the headlights, the figure. Taller, thinner, perfectly still, watching, waiting, and then gone. Just gone. The road stretched empty. Relief surged. Brief, fragile as fog on the windshield. And then the sound. Behind me, close, too close. Footsteps bouncing off the trees, echoing wrong, approaching, retreating, impossibly everywhere at once. My pulse spiked. I slammed on the accelerator. Gravel sprayed. The rig leapt forward. Tires shrieking, engine roaring. Branches scratched against the cab, leaving streaks. The headlights flickered. Another flash of black, just for a second, then gone. Impossible. And yet my stomach nodded. I knew it had never left. Not really. I forced myself to breathe. Inhale, exhale, keep the eyes on the road. Focus, keep moving. But the forest, the shadows, the fog, they were alive, moving, shifting. Shapes flickered at the edges of vision. I didn't dare blink. I couldn't. And then the road opened, a clearing, moonlight spilling over gravel, trees retreating. The forest paused, as if reconsidering. Relief surged, brief, fragile. Maybe I'd broken free. Maybe it hadn't followed. But then the whisper came again. Soft, deliberate, beneath the roar of the engine. "Why are you running?" I froze. The rig idled. Gravel crunching under tires. Moonlight flickering through mist. I realized with bone-deep certainty that I wasn't just being chased. I had never been chased. I had been observed, tested, moved. Every twist, every echo, every shadow. It had been deliberate. I swallowed, hands shaking, heart hammering, eyes scanning every curve, every shadow, and the forest waited, waiting for me to make the next mistake, waiting for me to finally stop. I pressed the accelerator again. Gravel sprayed. The mist churned, curling into the headlights. Shadows danced in ways no human mind could map. My pulse rattled. I was alive. I was moving. And yet, the forest, something beyond the forest, was patient. It had all the time in the world. And I realized with cold certainty that escaping was only part of the nightmare. Understanding, surviving, those were entirely separate. The lights of patrol trucks splintered the darkness, cutting the forest into sharp, unnatural angles. I didn't need the radios or sirens to know something had happened here. The road was quiet now. Too quiet, like the forest was holding its breath. My stomach churned before I even saw it. The rig sat at the edge of the clearing. Headlights dim and fogged over, engine cold. Tires sunk slightly into gravel, as if it had been waiting, patient. I remember stepping closer, the crunch of my boots swallowed immediately by the surrounding silence. No one inside. Empty, like it had been abandoned for hours. But the keys were still in the ignition, still warm. Almost. I knelt beside the driver's door, fingertips grazing the wheel. Sticky, faint. Nothing else. No blood, no sign of struggle. Just absence. The dash lights blinked weakly, dying, like the truck itself wanted to fade away. I glanced up at the trees. Shadows folded over the clearing, unnatural angles cutting through patrol lights. And then I noticed the footprints. They started at the cab, pressed deep into gravel, jagged, erratic, like the person had been stumbling or running. They weren't consistent. One foot pressed heavier than the other, toes digging. Then suddenly they stopped, just stopped. The last print was in the center of the clearing, crushed flat, and the earth around it looked wrong. Disturbed, but not by a human step. Something had lifted them, taken them. A shiver crawled down my spine. My hand drifted to my mouth, tasting iron. I tried to tell myself it was fear, adrenaline, imagination. But nothing explained the silence that followed, the sudden absence of wind, the way the forest seemed to recoil, as if it had swallowed something whole. One of the officers came closer, flashlight cutting through mist like a blade. Nobody inside. No personal effects. Just this, he said, gesturing at the prints. His voice trembled, a little. We both knew he didn't need to say it. Something had been here, and it hadn't left in any normal way. I crouched, examining the last print. Edges pressed deep, gravel scattered strangely around it. I reached closer, hesitated, and touched the soil. Cold, not just cold, wrong cold, as if the earth itself had taken a breath and held it. I jerked my hand back. Couldn't explain it. Didn't want to. A twig snapped somewhere behind me. I spun, flashlight trembling. Nothing, just trees. But something moved, or maybe something had always been moving. Shadows shifted against shadows, layering on each other, folding, bending. I could almost feel it watching, patient, waiting. The officer whispered something to his partner. I didn't hear, couldn't hear. My senses had tuned to another frequency, something alive in the stillness. I remembered the rig, the fog, the figure on the road. Every detail replayed in my mind, sharper now, more malicious. The footprints, the empty cab, the unnatural quiet. They were pieces of the same thing, one puzzle I couldn't assemble. And the question that pressed in my chest like a fist, where had it gone? How could a man or something just vanish into air? Another set of lights appeared in the distance. More officers, more patrol trucks. Their voices echoed, distant, hollow. I stepped back, letting them fill the clearing, and suddenly the footprints didn't feel like clues. They felt like warnings, like whoever or whatever had left them was still here, unseen, watching the chaos unfold. I swallowed, tried to steady my breathing. Then they just stopped. I muttered, almost to myself. The officer nearest me nodded, pale, stiff. Exactly. No signs of a trail. Nothing. Just gone. I wanted to ask questions, to scream, to demand answers. But the forest didn't care. It didn't answer. I could hear only my pulse hammering. Each beat a drum against the stillness. My eyes darted to the shadows between trees. Something shifted. Not fast, not obvious, just a flicker of movement. A darkness that didn't belong to any branch or leaf. I stepped forward, compelled, drawn. Every rational thought screamed to stay back. Every instinct begged to run. I knelt by the footprints again. Edges pressed deep, gravel scattered like tiny stars falling from the sky I couldn't see. And I noticed it. Tiny depressions between prints, almost invisible, circular. Too uniform to be accidental. Too deliberate. Someone or something had gone to great lengths to vanish, to erase. A branch snapped nearby. I flinched. Patrol lights swung toward the sound. Nothing, but my skin prickled. I realized with a growing horror that the forest itself seemed to conspire, to cover tracks, to move around me. I could almost feel it breathing through the mist, pressing down, curious, patient. I backed away from the prints, trying to force reason. Trucks, officers, lights. Surely it had gone somewhere. Yet the clearing didn't feel empty. It felt full, full of presence, watching, waiting. I could almost sense its shape between the shadows, towering, still impossible. One officer crouched by the truck, flashlight in hand. He tapped on the cab. No signs of forced entry. Key still in ignition. Nothing missing. Everything normal. He looked up at me. His eyes betrayed the same question I couldn't voice. How do you explain normal when nothing about this feels normal? I shivered. The wind picked up slightly, carrying the scent of wet earth and something else. Something metallic, sharp, faint, like iron burning. I couldn't place it. Tried to ignore it. Tried to convince myself. But the hairs on my neck and arms stood rigid. Something had been here, and it hadn't left. A distant owl hooted, too loud, too close, echoing through the trees. I jumped. Shadows shifted in response, folding over themselves, masking depth, masking space. I realized that the forest had become a labyrinth designed by something beyond comprehension. The prints weren't just evidence. They were an invitation, or a trap. I wanted to leave. I wanted to run. But the officers were distracted, talking, checking radios, searching the area. I couldn't leave, couldn't show weakness. Eyes darting, I scanned the tree. Movement flickered, but nothing concrete, just the feeling of being observed. I could almost hear breathing between trees, low, deliberate, patient. I traced the prints one more time in my eyes. The last depression, circular, shallow, unnatural. I crouched, almost touching it, cold pressed into my palms, as if the earth itself had hardened, frozen. My mind screamed for explanation. There was none, and then I realized with a hollow certainty. It had never been about leaving traces. It had been about making me see them, showing me something I wasn't meant to understand. The clearing felt smaller, oppressive, like walls closing in. I took a step back. Footsteps, mine, echoed against shadows. And in that echo, I thought I heard another set. Fainter, impossibly synchronized, but they're matching mine. Not following, not chasing, just mirroring. A reflection in sound, in presence. I stood rigid, pulse hammering, as the officer nearest me muttered into his radio. Static. Whisper. Sir, report? My throat tightened. Words stuck. I could feel in the forest, in the shadows beyond lights, beyond reason, waiting, patient. I wanted to look away, wanted to run, but I couldn't. Something had changed. The rig was empty. The footprint stopped. But the forest, the space, the air itself had shifted. I wasn't outside of it anymore. I was in it, part of it, watched, tested, observed. I took one last step backward, heart hammering, chest tight. The clearing seemed to tilt subtly, impossibly. Shadows stretched, leaning toward me. I felt breath on my neck, not warm, not human. I didn't dare turn. The officers called out again, unaware, oblivious. And I realized whoever had taken the truck, taken him, or maybe me, was patient. It didn't need to hurry. It never did. I swallowed. My voice trembled. It's still here, I muttered, whispered, really. And for a moment, the clearing agreed. Shadows shifted, miscoiled. The forest held its breath. And in that silence, I understood some things don't vanish. They wait, and they change everything they touch. We should have turned back. I can't say why we didn't. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was a thrill. Something in the way the trail seemed to vanish into the trees, pulling us forward like a question with no answer. I remember the first step off the main path, the crunch of leaves beneath boots that sounded too loud, too final. The forest closed and fast. Trees leaned toward each other, twisting over our heads like fingers. Shadows pulled in corners, moving even when nothing stirred. I felt it immediately, a shift in the air, heavier somehow, like we'd stepped into a different space. Light bent oddly through the branches, dappling the trail in patches that made my eyes twitch. Someone laughed, nervously, trying to cut the tension. The sound ricocheted between trunks and vanished, swallowed by the dense green. It should have been funny, a little relief, but instead, it felt like a warning, a signal we weren't meant to hear. I tried to tell myself it was just nerves, just imagination, But then I noticed the way the trail bent impossibly, narrowing in some spots, widening in others, as if the forest itself were rearranging behind us. I stopped. My breath came sharp and fast. Wait, do you guys see that? My voice sounded hollow, echoing against bark. A shape shifted in the shadows ahead. A figure, maybe standing still, or maybe it was just a trick of light. Something my mind created to punish me for stepping forward. But I felt it watching. Patient, silent, and impossibly still. We move again, slower now. Leaves caught on our jackets, scraping like fingernails. Branches whipped our faces. But no one complained. I was aware of every sound. The snap of a twig, the distant gurgle of a stream, the thump of my own pulse, and always the feeling of eyes just out of reach, just out of focus. The trail disappeared completely at one point. 1 minute, gravel under boots. The next, nothing but undergrowth so thick I couldn't see my own feet. Someone, probably Mark, swore softly. We exchanged looks, all of us wondering if we should have turned back hours ago. But the group pressed forward anyway, drawn by curiosity we couldn't name. I remember a story my uncle once told me about getting lost in these woods as a boy. He spoke of trails that weren't trails, paths that led to nothing but cold air and emptiness. I scoffed then, called it a ghost story. Now, walking here, I understood what he meant. The forest wasn't just dense. It was alive in ways that made my skin crawl, shaping itself around us, deciding which way we could see, which way we could move. I stumbled over a root, something low and flat. My hands hit the moss, damp and cold. A whisper ran through the trees. Wind, maybe, or maybe something else. I froze, every hair on my arm standing straight. I dared to glance back. The trail we had come from was gone, erased, no footprints, no sign we had ever walked here at all. Just endless trunks and shadows that swallowed light. Someone whispered, "Did we miss the turn?" Their voice was small, thin, swallowed immediately by the forest. I shook my head. No, we hadn't missed anything. The path was gone. It had always been gone. And in that instant, I realized we were no longer following a path. We were following the wrong one. Branches scraped my face. Leaves brushed against necks. I could hear others breathing, shallow and fast, trying not to make mistakes. Every step forward was deliberate, every glance behind a gamble. My mind raced with questions I didn't want to answer. What were we following? Why did the trail disappear? And what had been watching us all along? I reached for my phone. No signal. I cursed quietly, but it was useless. The sky was a dull gray, smothered by canopy. Light pressed down into green shadows that made time meaningless. I realized we could walk in circles forever here, and the forest wouldn't care. It didn't care about directions or friends or fear. It only cared that we were here and that we noticed it. I noticed footprints ahead, faint, barely pressing into the leaf litter. Not ours. Not any of ours. Small, uneven, like someone had been stumbling or dragging. My chest tightened. I wanted to turn around, tell the group to run back the way we came. But I didn't. I wanted to know who or what had been here before us. We followed them, half walking, half stumbling, heartbeats loud enough to echo. Every snap of twig underfoot made me flinch. I was aware of every sound, the call of a distant bird, the rustle of leaves, the whisper wind. But underneath it all was another sound, something quieter, deliberate, moving parallel to us. I couldn't place it. Couldn't tell if it was ahead, behind, or beside, but it was always there, watching, waiting. The footprints led to a clearing, almost perfectly circular. Light filtered in strangely pale and uneven, as if the sun had been bent to spotlight the center. There was no one there, nothing but grass and leaves, pressed down in a pattern that looked deliberate. I knelt, brushing my fingers over it. The earth felt cold, unnatural, like it had been shaped while I wasn't looking. Someone gasped. I looked up. The shadows at the edge of the clearing moved, not fast, not with a breeze, but with intent. The forest was shaping itself, subtly around the space, around us. The trees leaned, trunks curling inward, leaves rustled overhead, but no wind. And then the whispers started, barely audible at first, like voices carried on the wind. But they weren't wind. Not really. They spoke in syllables that didn't make sense, yet felt threatening, promising, mocking. I stumbled back, heart hammering, eyes darting. The group clung together, tense, muttering. Every instinct screamed to run. But the trail, the one we had followed, was gone again, vanished, and with it, every sense of safety. I looked at my friends, fear mirrored in their eyes. Mark whispered, "We should turn back, now." But turning back wasn't possible. Not really. The forest had folded over itself. The trail we came from existed only in memory, and memory was unreliable here. We moved through the trees, careful, trying to keep in sight of each other, but the forest shifted. Every step forward felt like walking deeper into a trap. Shadows lengthened unnaturally. The air smelled faintly of damp earth, something metallic, faint but sharp. I gagged on it. Something was here. Something had been shaping our path, letting us follow, letting us think we were choosing. A snapping branch behind me made me jump. I spun. Nothing. But then, between two trunks, I saw it. A figure blurred, too tall, too still. No features, just presence. And in that instant, my stomach dropped. It wasn't watching us yet. It was deciding when. And I knew, with sick certainty, that the forest had brought us here for it. I didn't scream. I couldn't. I felt paralyzed. All rational thought drowned in instinct. The figure didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't need to. The air around it seemed thicker, heavier. We couldn't see feet, couldn't see hands. Just height, presence, intent. We stumbled forward, trying to keep together, voices low, hearts hammering. Every sense screamed that the trail would betray us. Every glance over the shoulder revealed nothing, yet left me feeling observed. It had vanished. Or maybe it had never been there in a place we could see. The forest twisted further. Trees leaned, branches stretched. Light warped, time warped. And in that distortion, the clearing disappeared behind us. Every step forward felt like trespassing into something, older than reason, something patient, something that had been waiting for us to follow the wrong path. I whispered to myself, almost a prayer, "We shouldn't be here. We shouldn't be here." But the forest didn't answer. It only swallowed our words, folded us further into its shadows, shaping, shifting, deciding how long we would walk before we understood what had called us here. And then I realized, with fear I couldn't shake, that following the wrong path was a mistake. It was an invitation. The forest had chosen us. And whatever waited ahead had been waiting a long time. The forest didn't stay quiet. It never had. But the noises that came next weren't natural. The first time it happened, I thought it was just the radio acting up, crackling with static as we moved deeper into the trees. But it wasn't interference. Not really. It started as a whisper, low, almost drowned under the static hiss, but unmistakable. "Is anyone there?" The voice wasn't one of ours. I froze, hand hovering over the radio, eyes scanning the shadows between trees. Mark swore quietly behind me. Jenna gasped. We all knew it wasn't wind. Not out here. Not in the stillness that pressed on our shoulders. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, more to myself than to them. The radio clicked, hissed, then whispered again, this time louder. Words I didn't recognize. Gibberish at first. But my stomach sank. There were pieces I understood. Names. Commands. Warnings. Not aimed at us. Exactly. But meant to be heard. The others were panicking now. Someone tried to call out. Their voice cracked in the dense air, bouncing weirdly between trees. It wasn't echo, it was mimicry. The whispers repeated it, almost perfectly, just soft enough to make your brain wonder if you imagined it. I held my breath, straining to hear, straining to convince myself I was hallucinating. The radio hissed again, then settled for a heartbeat. And in that heartbeat, the forest changed. Shadows lengthened unnaturally, creeping closer than they should have, wrapping around trunks, brushing leaves against leaves. I felt eyes everywhere. My friend's eyes met mine wide, uncomprehending. And suddenly I didn't want to know how they were seeing the same thing I was. "Turn it off," Jenna whispered, trembling. "We shouldn't." I didn't. The pull of the voice, the pull of curiosity, was stronger. I tapped the radio, static crackling. "Who's there?" My voice sounded ridiculous, childish, but I needed a response, needed something concrete. The answer came immediately. Words in English. Clear. "You shouldn't be here." The forest seemed to shiver at the warning. Branches quivered, leaves dropped, and the ground seemed to hum. I stepped back. My boots sank slightly into the damp earth, and I realized we weren't alone. Not in the way we thought. There was presence, watching, calculating, waiting. Another voice joined in, this one harsher, fragmented. "Turn back. Leave now." I scanned the trees. No movement, no figures, just twisted shadows and trunks, impossibly straight and impossibly leaning at the same time, the kind of shapes that shouldn't exist in nature. Mark grabbed the radio, fumbling. The hiss turned into shrieks, layered, like a dozen voices talking over one another. Then a name, my name, crisp, deliberate, clear. My heart skipped a beat. I stumbled back. "Who? What?" The words died in my throat. The forest answered for me, rustling, snapping, pressing closer. We tried to move, stepping carefully through thick undergrowth, but the whispers followed, not just through the radio. They threaded into the air itself, curling around leaves, sliding along branches, brushing the back of our necks like fingers. "We see you," it said, and for a moment I was sure it wasn't coming from any device. It was the forest itself, speaking. I could feel panic spreading through the group. Jenna was shaking, holding the radio like it was a lifeline and a curse at the same time. Mark kept muttering, trying to rationalize it. It's someone playing a prank. Some hunters. Radio operators. But his voice was hollow, cracking. We all knew better. This wasn't ordinary. This wasn't human. And then the pattern changed. The whispers didn't speak to us anymore. They began mimicking our own voices. My voice. Jenna's. Mark's. But wrong. Slow, distorted, dragging syllables we didn't intend. I realized with a sinking stomach that the forest had learned us, watched us, and it was mocking us. I wanted to run. My legs wanted to run. But the trail we thought we followed was gone. Completely erased, swallowed by undergrowth and shadows. Every direction I looked seemed equally impossible. And all the while, the voices whispered behind us, ahead of us, inside the static. A pause, brief and false, gave me a glimpse of hope. I thought we might have a moment to breathe. And then the whispers started naming things. Places we hadn't seen, things we hadn't noticed. "Beneath the roots," it said. "Between the trunks." My stomach churned. How could it know? How could it see things hidden from us? A scream tore through the forest, suddenly. Jenna's, or maybe mine, or someone else. Hard to tell. The whispers shrieked over it, mocking, repeating it perfectly, stretching it until the sound became unbearable. I covered my ears, but the static filled my skull anyway. I felt my sanity stretch thin, fraying at the edges. Mark grabbed me, eyes wide. "We need to leave. Now." But leaving wasn't simple. Every path forward felt like a trap. Every step backward felt like a lie. The forest had folded over itself, bending paths, hiding exits, creating loops we couldn't break. And then it happened. I saw a movement between the trees. Quick, silent, too fast to catch fully. A shape, but not fully human. Tall, elongated, limbs bending wrong, stepping silently, then vanishing into shadow. The whispers amplified, overlaying human panic over something older, something cruel. I realized then that the voices weren't alone. They were a lure, a warning, and a guide all at once. They wanted us to know, to be aware, but not in a helpful way. Awareness here was punishment. Every second we listened, every step we took, the forest learned more about us, twisted more around us. We stumbled into another clearing, small and bright, but not safe. Light did not feel like sunlight. It was diffuse, gray, pressing down, highlighting leaves in ways that made them look like eyes. And the whispers, they calmed, briefly, almost inviting. Look closer. My chest tightened. I wanted to obey, wanted to see, wanted to know. But I knew better. Something shifted behind me. A snap, a rustle. I spun. Nothing. But the silence pressed against my ears like water. I realized that the absence of sound was louder than the whispers. I realized that for the first time, the forest wasn't hiding. It was patient, waiting, knowing we were desperate, knowing we were weak. I felt hands brush my shoulder. Not real, not human, just sensation. The radio buzzed violently, then went dead. Absolute static, absolute quiet. I staggered back, chest heaving, eyes darting. Every instinct screamed to flee, but there was no direction to flee. No path, only the forest, breathing around us, watching. Jenna sobbed. Mark whispered prayers under his breath. Words none of us understood. I clenched my fists, tried to ground myself in reality, tried to remind myself there is always a path. But the forest had rewritten reality, trails that existed only in memory, sound that came from nowhere, whispers that knew our names, our fears, our thoughts. And then, as if mocking our paralysis, the whispers returned. Clear this time, not distorted, not garbled, direct. You cannot leave. My stomach dropped. Not a warning, not a choice, a statement. The forest had declared it, and I realized, sick and trembling, that it wasn't just around us. It was inside us. It had always been inside us. I wanted to scream, wanted to run blindly, wanted to tear myself from this nightmare, but my body wouldn't obey. My mind was fractured, splitting in halves that couldn't reconcile what was real and what was conjured. The others were the same. We were all trapped in perception, and the forest was patient. I thought I saw a figure at the edge of the clearing, tall, dark, standing impossibly still, not moving, not breathing, just existing. And the whispers shifted, grew softer, like it was inviting me closer. The radio hummed faintly, but this time it didn't speak words. It hummed emotion, fear, knowledge, power. And I realized something I didn't want to admit. Whatever was here, it was alive, aware, waiting for our next move. I wanted to leave. I wanted it gone. But I couldn't. The forest had us, and the whispers were the leash. Every sound, every shadow, every twist of air reminded me there is no turning back, only forward, into whatever this is. And as we stepped into deeper shadows, the radio crackled again, not static this time, not a whisper, clear words. We see you. I froze, pulse thundering. The forest leaned closer. The whispers faded to nothing. Silence pressed in. And I realized the trail we followed wasn't wrong by accident. It was chosen. We were chosen. And now, the forest was deciding what to do with us. I don't remember exactly when I realized I was alone with the forest. Not physically alone. Mark and Jenna were there. But alone in a way that mattered. The kind of alone that eats at your mind while everything around you seems wrong. The radio was dead now. Just a faint hum that didn't respond. I grabbed my phone, hoping for signal. For something real. Anything. The line finally connected after 3 tries. 911, what's your emergency? The voice was calm, procedural. Too calm. I swallowed hard, voice shaking. We need help. We're on. I gave the trail name, the landmarks, the dirt road. My words sounded distant even to me, like someone else was speaking. Static. Then, hello? I answered again, repeating myself. Then, for a heartbeat, there was silence. And then another voice. Not the operator's. Not human. Soft, low, layered, overlapping. Stop. Don't move. I froze. Phone clutched so tight it bit into my palm. I could hear my own breathing. And then it wasn't my breathing. Something heavier, slower, imitating me, exaggerating me. The operator didn't react. They didn't hear it. Or maybe they weren't supposed to. Sir? Hello? The operator's voice finally cut through. But every time I spoke, the line went jagged, broken, like the forest itself had learned the pattern of my speech and was twisting it. I tried to describe the trail, the trees, the shape and the shadows we'd seen. But every word came back to me warped, distorted, whispering through the line. I could hear Jenna in the background, her breathing fast, uneven. "We shouldn't have come this far," she hissed. It's, she couldn't finish. There was a silence after her words, heavy, smothering. I begged the operator to send help, told him someone was out here. Someone or something. My voice broke. And then, abruptly, the line went dead. No static. No clicking. Nothing. I slammed the phone down. Nothing. Not a dial tone. Not a ring. Just gone. My heart thudded in my chest. So loudly, I was sure it echoed across the forest. I turned, expecting to see movement. Shadows twisting, limbs bending. Nothing except that feeling. That pressure. Watching. Waiting. Mark and Jenna looked at me, faces pale. It just died, Jenna whispered. I nodded. I didn't need to say more. The radio had already gone. Our last connection to anything outside had been swallowed. We started walking, not running. Not yet, but quick steps, careful over roots and uneven dirt. Every so often, I paused, scanning the edges of the trees. Every pause brought something new. A shadow flickered. A branch cracked too sharply, and the air pressed against my skin like fingers brushing. Then I heard it, my voice, clear, on the phone still in my hand, though the screen was black. "Don't move." My blood ran cold. It wasn't me, not entirely, but it was perfect enough to trick my ears, to make me hesitate, to make me obey. I tried to convince myself it was panic, stress, the mind playing games, but Jenna had heard it too. Mark had heard it too. Their faces froze when they realized what I was hearing. We all heard the same thing, and we all knew there was nothing human out here. We stumbled over a fallen tree. Jenna cried out, tripping over a root I didn't see until it caught her ankle. I helped her up, but the whispers followed. Low, scraping, almost alighted. Closer, nearer. Every step we took seemed guided, herded towards something unseen. I tried the phone again. Same result, dead. But when I held it close to my ear, the whispers shifted into a rhythm I could almost understand. It was repeating things. Directions? Commands? Or was it just making us feel smaller, weaker, trapped? I couldn't tell. I didn't want to. We found a small clearing, barely enough space to stop without brushing trees. My chest heaved. Sweat dripped down my back. I realized the forest wasn't still. It was leaning, shifting subtly, growing dense around us. Even the moonlight felt muted, like a filter had been drawn over the world. Mark broke the silence. "We have to keep moving." His voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. We have to get out. But as soon as he said it, the clearing seemed to stretch, elongate, folding paths behind us we didn't remember. I tried to argue, tried to find a trail we could follow. Nothing. The forest had changed. Then, faint at first, I heard it, the sound of footsteps. Not ours, not human, but perfectly synchronized with our own. Every step we took, another step answered. Behind us, I swear I felt something pacing, waiting. I turned, but nothing was there, only the dense shadows, the low hum of wind through leaves. I tried calling again, desperate. The operator answered once more, brief and mechanical. Then a click, a low whisper layered over it. "You shouldn't have come." My hand shook so badly I dropped the phone. It skittered across the leaves and stopped as if something had caught it, though nothing was there. Jenna screamed, low, choking. She tried to pick it up. I grabbed her arm. "Stop. Don't." And for a moment, everything stopped. The forest, the wind, even our breathing. It felt like the world held its breath with us. Then, faintly, I heard it again. Not a voice, not a whisper. Something like laughter. Or crying. I couldn't tell. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. The phone buzzed once. Screen lighting up with a single word. Run. We moved again. Faster. Heart pounding. My boots slipped in mud. Leaves catching. Snapping underfoot. The whispers continued. Mimicking our own words. Mocking our fear. Guiding us deeper into forest instead of out. Each echo twisted our minds, made our movements hesitate, second-guess, stumble. And then the first sign of what the 911 operator might have meant when they asked for location. Footprints. Not ours. Smaller. Narrow. Human-like, but wrong. Too perfect. Leading in circles. Leading toward the unknown. And they didn't stop. Not yet. I tried to grab Mark, to point them out. Look, they're footprints. But the moment I did, they shifted, vanished, erased, and in their place, more whispers. Closer, faster. The forest had no patience for hesitation, for thought, only movement, only fear. We kept moving. I don't know how long. Minutes, hours, maybe days in my mind. Time warped out here. The phone stayed dead. The radio stayed silent. But the whispers never left. They wrapped around us, inside us, seeping through our thoughts. And then, finally, silence. Absolute, unbroken, too perfect. My ears rang in the absence of sound. I froze. Jenna froze. Mark froze. For a heartbeat, I almost thought we had escaped, that the forest had grown bored. Then the phone lit up again. Screen black except for text. Look behind you. I turned slowly, stomach in knots. Nothing. Only the trees, the shadows, the way they bent toward us like fingers. But the whispering had stopped. For now. And in that pause and the emptiness, I understood whatever was out here, whatever spoke to the radio, whatever haunted the forest, it wasn't done. I whispered to the others. We need to keep moving. Don't stop. Don't. My words caught in my throat. Behind us, I felt it more than saw it. A presence, patient, deliberate, waiting, watching. And the footprints, they hadn't stopped. They were here. They never left. They were waiting for us to notice them, waiting for us to fall into the pattern, waiting for the next voice. The forest had claimed our connection to the outside world. The emergency line, our lifeline, was gone, and whatever remained wasn't human. Not entirely, and it wasn't leaving. I realized, with the first real clarity since it started, that we were being hunted, not by a creature we could see, not by a person we could fight, but by the forest itself, alive in a way our minds couldn't comprehend, speaking through radio waves, shadows, whispers, fear. And it knew our names. It knew our steps. It knew our thoughts. The phone buzzed one last time before dying. The whispers returned, soft now, almost caressing. Soon, they said, not a threat, not a promise, just inevitability. We moved forward, or at least I did. Mark and Jenna followed, too afraid to argue, too afraid to stop. Behind us, the forest shifted subtly, closing paths, hiding exits. And in that moment, I understood we weren't lost. We were being guided toward something, toward whatever the forest wanted, toward the answer that no one could hear except us. And in the silence that followed, I asked myself the question I've been avoiding since this nightmare began. When a line goes dead and nothing answers, who or what decides that we live? The ridge wasn't supposed to feel like this. The sky was clear, the kind of deep blue that promised calm. But every step I took along the narrow trail made my chest tighten. It wasn't the altitude or the loose rocks underfoot. It was something else. Something watching. At first, I told myself it was just nerves. Maybe the wind. Maybe a bird. High in the trees, calling out. But the feeling stayed. Sharp, insistent, curling around my spine. I turned slowly, scanning the slopes, the tree line, the shadows pooling in hollows. Nothing moved, but I knew I wasn't alone. I tried to shake it off, focus on the rhythm of my boots against the dirt, the scent of pine needles in the cool morning air. But every time I stepped, the ridge seemed to shift slightly, as though the earth itself was leaning in, listening. I heard a twig snap behind me, small, soft, almost polite. My heart stuttered. I spun. Nothing. Again. Only the wind fretting through the branches. I reached for my pack to pull out water. My hands trembled, not entirely from fear, because the feeling didn't come from outside. It came from inside. Someone or something was aware of me in a way that made my own mind echo with suspicion. My name wasn't called. Not yet. but it might be next. I kept walking, faster, not running. The trail narrowed, a ledge on one side dropping into a dark gully, the other hemmed in by tangled roots and jagged rocks. I glanced down. Shadows pooled where the sunlight didn't reach. Shapes that shouldn't be there flickered at the edges of my vision, and every time I looked directly at them, they vanished. My phone buzzed, a vibration that seemed louder than it should be. A message, no name, just a string of numbers I didn't recognize. I stared at it, hesitated. It was blank, nothing, but the screen glowed faintly, throwing the ridge into a sickly pale light. I heard a whisper, so soft I almost convinced myself I imagined it, but it repeated, clearer this time. You shouldn't be here. I froze. My breath hitched. The ridge was silent again, but heavier, like it was holding me in place, pressing against me from all sides. My eyes darted left, right, behind. Nothing moved, and yet I couldn't shake the certainty that something was following just beyond the reach of my vision. I quickened my pace. The trail curved sharply, trees crowding closer, roots snaking across my path. Each step made the hair on my arm stand. Every shadow seemed to twitch, a reflection of my fear. I tried calling out. Hello? My voice sounded small, swallowed by the ridge. Nothing answered, not even the wind. I stopped at a narrow clearing, forced myself to breathe. The ridge looked empty, calm, almost normal, almost safe. For a moment, I thought maybe I was overreacting. Maybe the ridge was just lonely. That thought didn't last. A sound, distant but deliberate, cracked through the forest. A branch snapping, heavier than any animal should make. I spun toward it. Silence. And then the whisper again, clearer, urgent. You can't leave. I stumbled backward. My mind raced. Was it someone else on the ridge? A hiker? A hunter? But the trail had been empty. The car park miles below had no one. No cars. No footprints leading up here. Nothing human. And yet, the feeling persisted. Not just that I was being watched, but that I was being guided, herded along, like the ridge itself had plans for me. I forced myself to move, one foot in front of the other. The trail dipped, then rose again. Rocks underfoot shifted. Loose. I slipped once, catching myself on a root, heart hammering. I looked around. Shadows leaned closer. Shapes I couldn't identify. And then nothing. Blank sky. Blank ridge. But I knew the shapes were there, just waiting for me to acknowledge them. I tried to talk to myself. You're safe. It's just your imagination. Trees. Wind. But the words didn't settle. My voice felt wrong. Too loud. Too human. The ridge responded. A sound behind me. Or maybe in front. Hard to tell. A shuffle, faint, rhythmic, almost matching my own steps. I stopped again. My pack swung against my side, hitting rocks. The echoes bounced differently this time. They were too precise, too deliberate, not natural. I spun around. Shadows shifted with me, keeping pace without being seen. And in that split second, I realized I wasn't alone. And maybe I never had been. The trail narrowed further. Roots and rocks clawed at my boots. I thought I saw someone in the corner of my eye, tall, still, waiting just behind the trees. I blinked. Gone. I turned my head sharply. Nothing, but the instinct didn't leave. The ridge itself seemed aware of me now, pressing, closing in. I could feel in the air, thick, heavy, almost tasting it. I tried calling for help. My phone screen remained blank, no signal. I tried to leave a message. Nothing. The ridge was silent again. Too silent. Even the wind held its breath. A whisper, soft and urgent, brushed my ear. Stop. Look. I froze. My pulse in my ears. My eyes darted around the clearing. Nothing moved. Nothing visible. But I could feel it watching, measuring, waiting. I took a cautious step forward. The ground shifted slightly beneath my foot. A branch snapped somewhere in the distance. I didn't dare turn. The feeling grew, pressing down like weightless hands on my shoulders. The ridge itself seemed alive. Every shadow held intent. Every patch of sunlight felt deceptive, hiding what shouldn't exist. I realized then that being watched wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that it was patient. It wasn't rushing. It had all the time in the world. I tried to breathe, tried to convince myself I could stay calm. My legs burned, every muscle tense. The trail seemed endless, looping back on itself. Every step I took, I thought I saw a movement at the edge of my vision. A figure, a shadow, something standing just beyond recognition. And each time I blinked, it was gone. But it had been there. I knew it. I stumbled, twisted an ankle, cursed under my breath. Pain flared. The ridge, it seemed to notice. The wind shifted. Shadows deepened. The whispering returned. Not words this time, but tones. Laughter? Crying? I couldn't tell. Just sounds meant to unsettle. To make me question my senses, my sanity. The sky shifted. Clouds moving faster than they should. Shadows stretched unnaturally, warping the ridge. I caught glimpses of shapes in the branches. Limbs too long, angles too sharp. Something was there, watching from every angle, and yet impossible to pin down. I thought of turning back, but every path looked wrong now. The trail I'd taken came alive with uncertainty. Roots that hadn't been there twisted beneath my feet. Rocks shifted subtly. Even the trees seemed to bend toward me, inviting, threatening. I realized that I didn't just feel watched. I felt guided, pushed. The ridge itself wanted me somewhere. A deep exhale escaped me. My voice, not just me, a breath behind me. I spun. Nothing. Just the ridge, patient, holding me in place. I tried to move faster, step over a root, leap over a rock, but the shadows moved with me, stretching, curling, holding back, keeping pace. And then it happened. The whisper returned, full, loud enough to echo across the ridge. You belong here. I froze, chest tight, stomach knotted. The sky seemed darker now, the sun muted. Every instinct screamed to run, to climb down, to scream. But the trail seemed endless. Forward or back, it was the same. The ridge had trapped me in its fold, and it wasn't done. I swallowed hard, heart hammering, eyes scanning the edge of clearing. Shapes flickered in the shadows. A tree limb shifted. Or was it someone? Something? I couldn't tell. But the instinct was undeniable. This was no ordinary hike. This was a path with rules I didn't understand, leading somewhere I didn't want to go. I moved again, faster now, forced myself, clinging to the hope that the ridge's patience had limits. Maybe the whispers would fade. Maybe the shadows would tire. But the feeling persisted, clinging to my spine, my shoulders, my senses, watching, always watching. And then, as I rounded a bend, something shifted. A figure, just for a heartbeat. Human? Not human? I couldn't tell. Eyes? Blank, deep, reflecting the sky, gone before I could blink. But the message was clear. The ridge had noticed me. It was aware, and it would wait, always wait. I took another step, then another. Shadows followed. Shapes shifted, whispers echoed. And deep down I realized, leaving the ridge wouldn't end the watching. It wouldn't end the whispers, because the ridge remembered. And whatever was alive here, patient and deliberate, would always find me again. The ridge had changed, not in shape or height, but in mood. The wind no longer whispered. It pressed. Each gust carried a weight that made my chest tighten. I thought I was alone, but the sound of footsteps told me otherwise. Slow, deliberate, matching mine, step for step, just beyond the edge of the trail. I froze. My boots dug into loose dirt. I turned sharply, scanning the dense forest flanking the path. Shadows clung to trees, twisting, leaning in ways no trees should. Nothing moved, yet the footsteps continued, echoing softly, unnervingly synchronized with my own. I forced myself forward, one foot, then the other, hoping speed would break the rhythm, shatter the cadence. But no, the steps remained, mirroring me like some malevolent metronome. I swallowed, dry mouth, eyes darting over gnarled roots and dark hollows. The forest felt alive now, breathing around me, inhaling my fear. A twig snapped behind me. I spun, heart hammering, fist raised like it could strike the unseen. Empty air stared back. Silence, and then the footsteps again. Closer, slower, purposeful. My pulse surged. What walked with me? Something human? I doubted it. Branches brushed my shoulders as I pushed past. The trail narrowed, hemmed in by ancient trees whose trunks seemed thicker than possible. Roots clawing the earth like skeletal hands. Shadows pooled beneath the canopy, stretching unnaturally, shifting with every glance. I caught glimpses of the periphery. Forms too dark, too still to be animals. I tried to speak. Who's there? My voice cracked, brittle, swallowed by the dense air. Nothing answered, not even the wind. Only the footsteps, now whispering a rhythm that felt intent on something. Tracking, studying, waiting. I stopped, breath shallow, heart loud. The footsteps stopped too, a heartbeat's pause that made the silence sharper. And then, without warning, they resumed. From somewhere to my left, just behind the trees, almost teasing, I whirled around, eyes straining. But the shadows remained still, expectant, patient. The trail twisted, plunging into a shallow dip. Roots tore at my boots, but I didn't care. My mind screamed to move faster. Yet every step felt heavier, as though the forest itself resisted my escape. Leaves rustled, not with wind, but with intention. Soft, deliberate, brushing against each other like fingers. I glanced up. Sunlight filtered through high branches, dappling the forest floor with fleeting gold. But the rhythm persisted. The footsteps, now accompanied by a subtle pressure in the air, moving, bending, shifting with me. I realized with a jolt. The forest wasn't just watching. It was breathing with me, anticipating me. Panic rose. I broke into a run, boots pounding roots and rocks. The ridge loomed on my right, sheer and shadowed. Every turn, every bend, the footsteps matched me. Closer, faster, yet always one measure behind my fear. My lungs burned. My arms ached. The forest laughed silently, leaves shivering in anticipation. I skidded around a corner. The path opened briefly to a sunlit clearing. Relief, fleeting. I slowed, gulping air, trying to convince myself I'd lost it. But then, snap, behind the clearing. A branch cracked under weight that wasn't mine. I whirled. Nothing. And yet, the footsteps resumed, echoing into the open, deliberate, and patient. I realized it wasn't trying to scare me. It wasn't playful. It was precise, studying, measuring, waiting for something to break. And I was already teetering on the edge of sanity. The trail twisted again, a steep incline with rocks jutting like broken teeth. I scrambled, hands clawing at roots, chest tight. Shadows danced in corners of my vision. Forms I couldn't name, couldn't understand. My own shadow stretched long behind me. But there were others, shifting independently, crouching, waiting. A low whisper curled through the trees. Not words, not yet. A vibration almost fell in my chest. The steps slowed, then quickened, matching the whisper's cadence. I stumbled, heart hammering, spinning toward the sound. Nothing. The ridge, the trees, the very air seemed to wear me now. I was not just seen. I was marked. I forced myself forward, each step calculated, trying to ignore the rhythm of those unseen feet. But every movement, every breath, tightened the pressure around me. It wasn't hunger, not yet. It was anticipation. Something patient, intelligent, relentless. I paused atop a narrow ledge, scanning the forest below. Shapes flitted between trunks, low and fast, disappearing when I blinked. A footstep, then another, sounded behind me, closer than ever. My body froze. My mind screamed. I turned slowly, hard in my throat. Nothing, only branches, only shadows. Yet I knew, without doubt, that something was there, watching, breathing, waiting. I ran again, faster, boots slipping, hands scrabbling at roots. The forest twisted with me, shadows deepening, light bending unnaturally across rocks and leaves. The whispers grew louder, almost forming words I couldn't catch. And always the steps, matching me, mocking me, invisible yet undeniable. My foot caught a root. I stumbled forward, chest slamming against a tree trunk. Pain shot through my ribs, breath ripping from me. Behind, A soft crunch of leaves. Footsteps. Closer. My mind raced. I needed to escape, but the path behind was blocked by thick undergrowth. The ridge to my side dropped into shadow. Forward was the unknown. I forced myself upright, adrenaline flaring, lungs heaving. Each step forward felt heavier. Shapes in the corner of my vision shifted with intent. Disappearing when looked at directly, I realized the forest wasn't just alive, it was patient. It could wait. It had all the time in the world, and it had me exactly where it wanted. A sudden gust of wind carried a whisper that made my skin crawl. You can't hide. I froze. My boots dug into dirt. Branches trembled around me. And then I saw it. A movement too deliberate to be wind, too purposeful to be animal. Something stepping from shadow to shadow, just beyond recognition. I blinked. Nothing. Yet the rhythm persisted. The steps, soft, mocking, patient, following me relentlessly. I ran harder, scrambling up a slope littered with loose stones. Each footfall echoed strangely, longer than it should, bouncing off unseen angles. Shapes move in peripheral vision. Faster now, impossible yet real. The forest seemed to bend around me, closing the distance, whispering through leaves that were no longer just leaves but extensions of something alive, aware, calculating. I stumbled into a shallow gully. My hands clawed at rocks and roots. I dared to glance behind. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the forest floor, moving, waiting. And the footsteps, closer, slower, deliberately delayed but unmistakable, matching my rhythm, anticipating my fear. A brief sense of clarity struck me. It didn't want me gone. Not yet. It wanted something else. Fear? Understanding? Recognition? I couldn't tell. Only that the ridge, the trees, the shadows, they were aware of every heartbeat, every breath, every decision. I scrambled up again, pushing through pain, ignoring the gnawing dread in my chest. Branches whipped against my face. Roots caught my boots. Behind me, the steps echoed closer, lighter, almost taunting. I couldn't see it, couldn't name it, but I knew it had learned me in the span of minutes. And minutes stretched into eternity on this cursed ridge. The path curved sharply, dropping into a narrow canyon. I clung to roots, breathing hard, heart hammering. The shadows seemed to deepen, coalesce, forming angles my mind refused to accept. Steps paused. Silence, tense, expectant. Then the whisper returned, close, intimate, brushing my ear. You belong here. I spun, chest heaving, eyes darting. Nothing. Only forest. Only shadow. Only the feeling of being watched, measured, hunted. Not for death, not yet, but for something older, slower, patient. I ran again. Faster. Desperate. The footsteps followed, unwavering, deliberate. Every branch, every leaf, every shadow seemed to lean toward me, pushing, pulling, guiding. The air itself felt alive, thick with intent. I realized I wasn't on a trail. I was on a path the forest had carved for me. And then at the edge of the clearing ahead, I glimpsed it, or glimpsed them. Shapes crouched among trees, too tall, too still, too deliberate. Eyes reflecting the muted sunlight. Before I could blink, they vanished. Only the footsteps remained. Always the footsteps. I staggered forward, chest burning, lungs raw. The forest whispered. Shadows shifted. The ridge breathed. And deep inside, I knew leaving wasn't the point anymore. Understanding wasn't the point. Survival wasn't enough. The ridge had chosen to teach me something. And whatever waited beyond the next bend, it wouldn't let me leave unchanged. The phone rang, shrill and sudden, and I barely recognized the sound. Not that it mattered. I didn't answer. Not at first. I didn't want to hear it. But something inside me did, a pulse of curiosity stronger than fear, and I grabbed it anyway. 911, what's your emergency? The voice was calm, professional. Somewhere safe. Somewhere I wasn't. I tried to speak. Tried to form words that wouldn't crumble in my mouth. But all that came out was a rasp, a half-breed gasp that sounded wrong even to me. Then it happened. Behind the static. Something else broke through. Breathing. Slow at first. Deliberate, measured, but not human. It pressed against a line, filling my ears, rattling inside my chest. I flinched, my hand trembling on the receiver. A scream cut through next, sharp, ragged, raw. Not my own, not any voice I knew. It echoed, warped, twisted as if the walls themselves had decided to speak. And then silence. Only the line, buzzing alive, watching. Hello. The dispatcher's voice cracked slightly. Sir, are you there? I tried to explain, tried to tell them what I'd seen, what I'd felt creeping behind me through the trees, following me like a shadow that had grown teeth. My voice faltered. My words faltered. The line hissed, distorted, breathing and screaming again, louder, closer, as though it had learned to mimic fear itself. I dropped the phone for a second, heart hammering. When I picked it up, the line was dead, static. A faint echo of what just screamed, fading into nothing. The dispatcher tried again, voice insistent, but the call wouldn't reconnect. The number I had dialed belonged to the world outside, the world that didn't understand this ridge, this forest, this presence. I ran, my boots scuffed over rocks and roots, breath ragged. The forest seemed to respond, twisting around me, shadows thickening, shapes bending in ways that made no sense. Branches brushed my arms like fingers, grasping, teasing, warning, and somewhere behind, echoing through the trees, the distorted breathing followed, matching mine, taunting me. I paused atop a slope, chest heaving. The ridge opened briefly, a sunlit clearing ahead, but it offered no relief, no safety. The air thrummed with expectation. The whispers returned closer, just at the edge of comprehension, curling through the leaves, around the rocks, around me. And beneath it all, the sound of the last transmission pulsed in my ears, haunting. I thought of the dispatcher, of the voice that had tried to reach me through the receiver. Somewhere, they were listening, waiting for my words, my panic. But what could I say? How could I describe something that wasn't meant to be described? Something that erased itself before understanding could form. The forest had its own language now. On a breath, step, shadow, and it spoke only to me. A twig snapped sharply behind me. I spun. Nothing. Only shadows pooling between the tree trunks, unmoving, patient. But I knew. I could feel it. It had shifted. Closer. Watching from just beyond sight. Learning. And the phone's voice replayed in my mind. Distorted, fractured, alive. I pressed on, forced myself forward. Each step felt heavier. Every heartbeat louder, echoing in my skull. The ridge narrowed, hemmed in by trunks thick with moss, roots that twisted like veins. My lungs burned. The distorted screams haunted me. They weren't constant, just fragments coming in fits, as if the line itself had a mind, breathing and pausing with purpose. I stumbled over a rock, hands scrabbling. The static hissed in my ears, the screams flickering around me like shards of glass. I tried to scream back, to assert my presence, but only a whisper came. My own fear had become my voice. The forest seemed to respond, bending the light, twisting the shadows, drawing me deeper. A low, wet sound slid across the forest floor. Something moving, unseen, deliberate. The distorted breathing returned, interspersed with faint, high-pitched tones I couldn't identify. Not words. Not yet, but meaning. Some intent behind the noise, watching, judging. My hand found a tree trunk for balance. My nails dug into bark like claws, trying to anchor myself in reality. I remembered the dispatcher again. They had tried to ask questions, tried to coax me into coherence. But coherence was gone. Logic was useless here. The last transmission had broken the world into something unrecognizable. And the thing behind it, following, breathing, watching, had already crossed into me, into my senses, into the rhythm of my steps. I glanced behind. A movement at the corner of my vision, quick, deliberate, vanished when I blinked. The forest held its breath. The distorted screams pulsed again. I had no idea where they came from. No idea if the call had been real or hallucination or both. But I knew one thing. Whoever or whatever was on the other end, it was gone now, but its echo remained, and it had found me. I ran harder, lungs screaming, boots slipping over moss-covered rocks. Every branch seemed to reach for me, every shadow twisted, bending unnaturally. The ridge narrowed further. My pulse synced with the rhythm of the forest, the distorted breathing, the fragments of screams, the whispers. They were no longer separate from the world. They had become part of it, part of me. A gust of wind carried a whisper directly to my ear, soft, intimate, curling around my skull. You can't leave. I stumbled, my chest heaving. My hands trembled, gripping roots and rocks for balance. And then I heard it clearly, the footsteps. Not matching mine, not delayed, not patient. Following relentless, every beat deliberate. The forest seemed to contract, shadows lengthening unnaturally, bending in impossible angles. The ridge had become a corridor, guiding, herding, trapping me. I tried to call out, but my voice faltered, swallowed by static in my own mind. The last transmission, the 911 call, replayed in my memory, distorted, fractured, alive. I realized then I wasn't alone in recalling it. Somewhere, something remembered it too, learned from it, adapted to it, and now it followed me, step for step, breath for breath. Branches scratched my face, roots tore at boots, shapes moved between trunks, but never in the same spot twice. I could see nothing clearly, and yet I knew with absolute certainty that eyes were on me, calculating, waiting for a slip, a pause, a mistake. The distorted breathing pulsed again, closer now, mingling with whispers that no longer tried to be words, only intent, only presence. I scrambled up a narrow incline, heart in my throat, legs burning. Shadows stretched long across the forest floor, independent of the sun, bending in impossible directions. I realized then that the forest itself had become an extension of the call, a living archive of the last transmission. Each echo, each fragment of sound, each breath recorded, amplified, returned to me, a scream, high-pitched and warped, toward the clearing ahead. I froze, chest heaving. The distorted breathing joined it, layered, pulsing with rhythm. I couldn't tell where the sound ended and the forest began. It was all around me, inside me, guiding me, shaping the panic into something precise. I ran again. Every step, every gasp of air, every heartbeat was mirrored in the shadows, echoed in the whispers, folded back in the distorted calls of that impossible line. The ridge narrowed further. Trees leaned in, not threatening, not aggressive, but patient, watchful, waiting for me to understand that the forest, the call, the footsteps, they were all connected. I stumbled into a shallow gully. Rocks cut my hands. Boots slipped. The distorted breathing grew louder, now punctuated by another sound. A soft, wet click, deliberate. Not footsteps, but movement. Watching, studying, waiting. And I understood, somewhere deep inside, that the call had been more than a cry for help. It had been an invitation. And whatever followed me now had accepted it. I paused, back against a tree, chest heaving, arms trembling. The forest was silent for a heartbeat. Then, the distorted scream, faint, almost intimate. The footsteps, closer than I thought possible. I realized the last transmission wasn't over. It had never ended. And it wasn't just recorded. It had spread, infused itself into the world around me. I forced myself to stand, to move, forward. The forest shifted with me, bending light, reshaping shadows. Every glance revealed movement at the edges of perception, not tangible, not real, yet undeniable. The distorted breathing pulsed, now rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat, synchronized with mine. And I knew it had learned me. It would not let me leave. A final gust of wind carried a whisper in my ear, colder than the night, intimate, knowing. You answered, now you belong. And I ran, not towards safety, not toward escape, but simply away, away from the ridge, away from the sound, away from the forest that had learned my rhythm, my fear, my breath. Behind me, the echoes of the last transmission followed, alive, relentless, patient. And I realized, even as I stumbled into shadowed trees and roots, that some calls are never truly ended. They wait, always, watching, breathing,